Hi, councillors. It has just gone 6:05 officially, although the clock on the wall is still a little bit slow, as it always is. But given the fact that we're likely to have quite a lengthy debate this evening, I will now make a start, and we will start, as always, with me reminding everybody now that this evening's proceedings are being recorded and they are being webcast live. So, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any this evening? John?
Yeah, Councillor Traherne, Councillor Preston.
No others? Moving on then to agenda item 2, which is to hear the roll call of members and to receive any declarations of interest.
Councillor Julie Aviett. Councillor Anthony Bennett. Councillor Richard Burton. Councillor Janice Birch. Councillor Rhiannon Birch. Councillor Jonathan Bird. Councillor Bronwyn Brooks. Councillor Liz Burnett. Councillor Jeff Cox. Councillor Claire Curtis. Councillor Pamela Drake. Councillor John Drysdale. Councillor Kate Edmonds. Councillor Stuart Egan.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Chris Elmore. Councillor Chris Franks. Councillor Eric Hacker. Councillor Howard Hamilton. Councillor Val Hartree. Councillor Keith Hatton.
Budgets. I am an LEA Governor at Dinas Parish Primary School.
Councillor Nick Hodges. Councillor Jeff James. Councillor Hunter Jarvie. Councillor Gwyn John.
Present, and declaration of interest in item 10F, final capital proposals, and LEA Governor of Lantern Major Comprehensive School, dispensation to speak and vote.
Councillor Fred Johnson. Councillor Ian Johnson.
Presennol, hoffwn ac am bydd yn item 10F. Mr President, I would like to declare an interest in item 10F as I'm a local authority governor at Barry Comprehensive and at Gladstone Primary School, both of which are part of that item. However, I have no dispensation. I do not need to leave the room.
Councillor Maureen Kelly-Owen. Councillor Peter King. Councillor Kevin Marney. Councillor Anne Moore. Councillor Neil Moore. Councillor Andrew Parker. Councillor Bob Penrose. Councillor Anthony Powell. Councillor Rhona Probert. Councillor Adam Riley. Councillor Gwyn Roberts. Councillor John Thomas. Councillor Ray Thomas. Councillor Steffan William.
Allfod gen i yn eitem 10F, dwi'n lywodraethwr ar gyfer ysgol Bro Morgannwg a hefyd ar gyfer awdurdod llai ar gyfer ysgol Ynys y Barry. So I'm a governor for the LEA at ysgol Bro Morgannwg, item 10F, and also minor authority rep at Barry Island Primary, so I will have to leave the room for that item.
Councillor Margaret Wilkinson. Councillor Clive Williams. Councillor Chris Williams. Councillor Eddie Williams.
I'm present. These are declared under item 10F, the capital proposals. I'm an LE Governor of Clatford Major Comprehensive. I've got dispensation. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mark Wilson.
Agenda item 3 then is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of December and the 2 special meetings held on the 9th of February.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I formally move the 3 council meetings, as you said, 14th of December and the 2 on the 9th of February?
Councillor Ian Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. During these meetings, a number of recorded votes were taken. Those recorded votes have been recorded differently within the minutes. In some cases, they've been recorded with the name with an X alongside. That's the meeting of the 14th of December. And then in the meeting of 9th of February, they're recorded as they have previously been with the name of the councillor and in a row underneath for, against or abstain. Would it be possible for us to ensure that there is a single method of this being minuted so that we can have consistency? My preference would be to maintain the previous system that we had, for, against and abstain, so you can see which councillors have voted in which direction. On a secondary point, at the meeting in December, this council voted to publish attendances of our council meetings, of all council meetings, on the websites of individual councillors. Democratic Services took the decision, I believe, that it would be done only from the 14th of December onwards, so from the date of that meeting. I believe that many in this chamber would like to see those attendance records backdated to the beginning of this council term in 2012, and will be interested to see what advice can be provided as to whether that is possible.
Okay. Well, certainly my understanding on that last issue would be that the decision of the council was taken, and therefore that decision became active from that date. Therefore, anything that happened before that would be irrelevant. But I do take your points on board regarding the way minutes are recorded, and I'm sure that officers will ensure that in the future the votes are all recorded in the same way. Thank you. So, are people happy for me to sign the minutes? Yes. Thank you. That brings us on then to agenda item 4, and that's to receive announcements from myself, the leader, and any members of the cabinet and the head of paid service, and also to receive any petitions. So what I'm going to ask for first of all, I know that there is one petition being submitted by Councillor Burton this evening. Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hereby present this petition on behalf of the residents listed on the actual petition, calling for the Vale of Glamorgan Council to install road safety measures and a crossing at the Witchell area of Barry Road in Barry. It is well supported. I support their call, and I call on this council to take action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Lovely. I'm now going to call on the leader to make a few announcements.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not often I do, but there's a couple of things I'd like to say tonight. First of all, can I congratulate our new Director of Learning and Skills, Paula Ham. Welcome. She's been doing a sterling job as the Interim Director. We went through the process. Can I thank the members of the Senior Management Appointments Panel. You would. We have carried out a strenuous job, and I just congratulate Paula on a superb interview. And I know she's going to do a great job. The second thing I'd like to talk about is just to remind people or inform people that today was a momentous day for Wales, a momentous day for the South East Wales region, for the city, Cardiff capital city region. We signed the document today at Cardiff Airport. It was a very well attended event. I went there with the managing director and the deputy leader, along with all the rest of the leaders from Wales, from the 10 authorities, I should say. And it was really, really good day. Everybody congratulated everybody on the work they did, and can I congratulate Council again on taking the decision they did at the last meeting. Excuse me. The last thing I'd like to do is welcome back Councillor Edmonds after giving birth, and welcome back to the fold. And I know you've got a little one somewhere who might be looking for you. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. Just a few things from myself. During this term of my office, I have continued to attend civic functions both inside and outside the Vale of Glamorgan, including charity events, concerts and 100th birthday party. The Deputy Mayor welcomed guests and councillors to a poignant preview commemorating 10 years of Holocaust Memorial Day at Art Central Gallery. I was also delighted to replicate an event initiated by my colleague and past Mayor Councillor Fred Johnson and invite all the Vale PCSOs to tea in recognition of their support to our community. Fundraising for my charities has continued to gain momentum. I would like to thank everybody who has supported the fundraising so far. Work on the Landmark Hospital Orchard project has started. Further funds are being raised through the sale of my charity cookbook, which was launched today. And I do have some copies available this evening if you'd like to come and see me after the council meeting. And the suggested donation is only £3, and they will be a prized treasure, I can assure you of that. As well as we have a St David's Day celebration concert which takes place this Friday at All Saints Church in Penarth with the excellent City of Cardiff Brass Band plus guest vocalists. Further fundraising continues with a whisky tasting evening on the 17th of March, and not forgetting the Mayor's Ball on the 31st of March, and finally the Golf Day on the 7th of April. Tickets are still available for all events, and I would again like to thank all those who have donated so far for their support and generosity. Has been fantastic. Thank you. That moves us on now to agenda item 5, which is the use of the Managing Director's emergency powers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. This is a report to notify Council of the emergency powers that have already been taken, and therefore the report is here for noting.
Happy to note? Thank you. Item 6 then is the allocation of seats on committees.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will. I'll raise to discuss it, but clearly it's not going to be in my hands. The council needs to determine the allocation of seats on committees, which takes into account political balance, which the calculations are attached to Appendix 8 of the report. Following the resignation of Councillor Clive Williams from the Conservative Group, the Conservative Group's overall entitlement to seats across the committee reduces by a total of 5. They're required to give one of those 5 seats on the Scrutiny Committee to Councillor Clive Williams, to give one to Lantwood Major first, and the remainder to Councillor Clive Williams. At this stage, I know that John, I don't know if you've had a chance to deal with it, and I'll leave it open to Councillor John to allocate the 5. Clearly, the Scrutiny Committee would straight automatically go to Councillor Williams, and then one of the first of the remaining 4 would fall to you as a Lantwood Major, and the remainder would go to Clive. So clearly, if we can do it tonight, it would be better, because it needs to be addressed at Council. Otherwise, if we can't do it tonight, it needs to be delegated so that the head of Democratic Service can be informed in the morning.
Thank you, Leader. I can do my bit tonight anyway. Conservative Group will give up our our seat on corporate resources, so Clive will keep his place on corporate resources scrutiny committee. And the other 4 committees which we will give up is audit, standards, my place on discretionary housing payments, and Councillor Cox's place on voluntary sector joint liaison.
Thank you for that, John.
Thank you, John. I don't, if you want to choose one tonight, if not,
Well, we'll speak, yep.
can we therefore agree that delegation to the head of Democratic Services so that we can put it in place? Yeah? Thank you.
Okay, a couple of people have indicated they want to speak. Councillor Clive Williams first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am totally unforgiving in being placed in this unique position after being the Vale and Town Councillor for the Vale of Glamorgan and the Town Council for 34 years. I wish to thank my fellow councillors and the council staff for their understanding and ongoing support. Thank you.
Thank you, Clive. Councillor Manny.
Yeah, just a quickie, perhaps Gwyn might be able to clear this up. Oh, I'm sorry, should have stood. Just reading our political forum just last week that land affairs had been decommissioned with the Electoral Commission. That's not true, is it? That's fair enough. That's all I wanted clarification. Thank you.
Councillor John Thomas.
Thank you. Just to let you know that Councillor Maureen Kelly-Owen will be taking our place on the planning committee.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 7, which is the consultation with non-domestic ratepayers. Leader.
Thank you. As usual, we go for representations. It closed at noon today, and we've received none. So I just report that we've received none.
Thank you, Leader. Agenda item 8 then is the review of the Council's Constitution Officer delegations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council is often asked to consider the proposed changes to officer delegations set out in paragraphs 7 and 8 of this report, and if approved, then the Constitution will need to be amended. Basically, as we all know, and we are doing it on a regular basis, the Constitution remains under review and will continue to do so. One of the requirements of the Constitution is that the monitoring officer can be required to make or remove any inconsistencies, ambiguities or typographical corrections, but then to report them to the Council. You may recall in December we made some changes to financial procedure, contract procedure rules. At that time, that was in relation to tenders, and it allowed some delegation for amounts greater than £75,000 to be approved to the relevant cabinet member. It allowed for amounts greater than £75,000 to be agreed, but only with the approval of the relevant cabinet member. We subsequently found out that on pages 257 to 259, the contracts area of the Constitution gives delegation to all directors and service heads, but currently it was in there at the old rate of £100,000. So in order to make it consistent, we're asking Council to change that to £75,000, and again, if they did that, they would need the consent of the relevant cabinet member. So basically what we're doing is housekeeping, putting the figures exactly the same. Fairly straightforward, I think. Can I formally move?
Thank you. Agreed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 9. It's a reference from the Standards Committee. A slight strange one, really, because normally Standards Committee don't ask us to do something. But basically what's happened is they were asked to call an urgent meeting in order to deal with some issues. It was in terms of Councillor Aviat having a by-election, being a member of the Town Council, wishing to stand on the committee, and therefore needed some urgent dispensations. In relation to that, the Audit Committee thought it was relevant that we should allow the delegation to go to the monitoring officer in consultation with the chairman or in his absence the vice chairman to grant delegated powers and approve urgent applications of dispensation. But I actually should say that basically what they would be is restricted to a similar type of application that's been agreed in the past. For example, I'll give you an example with the ones that I've just talked about with Councillor Aviat, but also in terms of the reshaping reports, because sometimes people who are on a town or community councils require a dispensation because they are that member. Basically, what the Standards Committee have said is there's absolutely no need to call a full committee. It costs money anyway. To actually give a dispensation which is normal, regular, and not out of the ordinary. If they were out of the ordinary, then they would have to call a special meeting. So basically what it is changing the constitution to give delegation to the monitoring officer, again in consultation with the chair or vice chair of the Standards Committee. Fairly sensible proposal, I think.
Your leader. Okay. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. No problem with, no problem with the Chair, but under paragraph 2, the third line, I think it should read to consider, refuse or approve. You can't refuse and approve. So I think I suggest a very minor change in order that it makes clearer sense.
I'm happy to take that.
Okay. With that slight amendment then, are we happy to accept? Thank you. That brings us on to agenda item 10 then. And the first one is 10A, but before we take that, perhaps I can ask Council's indulgence, because I think it would be helpful if we move 10B, which is the employee pay policy, to the end of the agenda. Otherwise, all the officers sat up here are going to have to leave and then come back in. Are you happy that we move that to the end? Thank you. So we'll start with 10A then, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I forgot to do that, didn't I? Sorry. Basically, this is seeking Council's approval to proceed with the external wall insulation to properties in Ramsey Road, area of Gibbonsdown, and to decorate external walls to all council-owned properties on the eastern side of Gibbonsdown. If you recall, or maybe you won't, the previous council was successful in securing a £2 million grant to fund the installation and install external wall insulation to both public and private sector houses in the area of Gibbonsdown. It was actually in the Ramsey Road and Pendine Close area. Part of the Welsh Government Warm Homes Arbit grant was to target both private and public sector homes in the area, so we were able to do that. Council submitted a further bid because there were some properties within the area that weren't covered in the initial bid, to continue that work with the remaining properties in a similar type. Regrettably, the grant was refused. The main reason was the lack, believe it or not, of a small number and a lack of private properties being addressed through the current bid. There were 87 properties to finish off the scheme, but only 7 were private. And also the fact that I think Welsh Government were suffering budget cuts, and therefore they decided to take that stance. In order for us to move forward, and following the first scheme, which was particularly well received and we wanted to extend it. So we looked to find if there was alternative funding. Indeed, the proposals are that we will have alternative funding in order to do that. The capital programme is able to support the programme of external wall insulation to the remaining 80 council-owned properties on the western side of the estate. And that could commence very early and finish this year with a bit of luck, at least start this year. The external decoration work to the eastern side of the estate could also be funded from the current provision with the HRA revenue account. And again, that could start this financial year. So basically what we're asking council to do is to change the capital programme, because in terms of St Catherine's Court, Dale Court, Ramsey Court of Gibbonsdown, it would cost £800,000, which is above the £500,000 limit that we have delegation in Cabinet, and also because of the fact that that one's coming here, to also agree the external painting to all council-owned properties at the Gibbonsdown estate, which would cost £500,000. I think it's incumbent upon us to try and finish the projects. One of the things that we did do in Cabinet was said, well, if there are private properties, then we should give them the opportunity of carrying out that work too, but clearly at their expense. So basically what it is to finish off a job we started, and we've got the finances within the current budgets to actually deal with it. So can I formally move?
Okay. Council happy to approve? Yeah. Thank you. We'll now move on then to 10C. We'll just get Councillor Avian back in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a reference from Cabinet on the 6th of February. Council has been asked to consider and endorse the Council's pay policy for 1718.
Sorry. We're leaving that one to the end.
We are. Sorry. Thank you. My fault. It's been a hard day. Yes. Voluntary Sector Compact. Again, a reference from Cabinet on the 20th of February. As members may know, since 2008, the Council had in place a formal compact with the voluntary sector in the Vale of Glamorgan, which does set out shared values and visions for joint working. Compact was between the voluntary sector, then the Vale Centre for Voluntary Services, the Vale of Glamorgan Council, the then Vale of Glamorgan Local Health Board and Cardiff and Vale Health Trust. Since that time, there's been lots of changes within those structures, and therefore it was decided that the compact should be revised. The revised compact would cover the proposed period from 2017 to 2021. And basically what's been proposed is that we haven't a compact, but simply with Glamorgan Voluntary Services, as it's called now. We've had discussions with Cardiff and Vale University Health Board, who would be the incumbent, and they have agreed that they don't really need to be part of this compact because there are others in place. Since this has gone on, we've changed lots of things. We have the Regional Coordinating Committee, which this council, Cardiff Council, the Health Board, voluntary sector all meet together. There is also the fact that the voluntary sector have their own compact with the Health Authority. So basically what we decided was that it would be more reasonable, more co-agent really, to have a change in the membership. So it would be the voluntary sector, ourselves, and actually representative from the town and community councils too. So what we've been asked to do tonight is to change to endorse the compact in the first instance, to agree the membership, which would be eight elected members, which is a slight change from what it is, because it's currently 10. 7 representatives from the voluntary sector, again slightly changed. 1 representative as nominated by the Community Liaison Committee from the Town and Community Council within the Vale of Glamorgan. So that would be the membership. This membership would change after the AGM. We're also been asked to agree the terms of reference which are before you, and I don't intend to read them out. But basically, we're asking the council to agree the compact. It's a change of constitution, obviously, change of membership, but would take effect from the annual meeting. So can I formally move?
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Leader, for that. I don't plan to oppose this tonight. However, I do wish to repeat my concerns about the local health board not interacting with a council committee in the same way as it has in the past. While I recognise that the current voluntary sector joint liaison committee actually includes 3 of the cabinet members, it is potentially the best way of the voluntary sector and the health sector lobbying and discussing those issues. So I feel that it's an opportunity missed by the health board to maintain that link with the backbench members of this council. That is my greatest concern, because while there are many different committees and different organisations with whom they are talking with the executive or representatives of the executive, and they're not talking always with backbench members from other political parties than the one who is in charge of the Vale Council at whatever point. Similarly, I hope that next time round, in the next council, the voluntary sector will play a greater role in this committee, because on occasions there have been very small numbers in the voluntary sector. We know the important role that they play, and it will be great to see them playing a more fruitful and positive role interacting with councillors on that committee. That is the purpose of that committee. That is the purpose of this compact. I hope it is successful.
Can I just respond, please? Yes, you made the comments that you did at the voluntary sector, but the point that I think was made was that the Health Board still has an opportunity to meet with members of this council through, for example, the Scrutiny Committee, as indeed they do on a regular basis. They can come to a Scrutiny Committee, any member can come to a Scrutiny Committee, and they can sort of have a conversation and be scrutinised by members of this authority. The Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison isn't more of a Scrutiny Committee, but more of an information gathering committee in lots of respects. We have discussions, yes. I think it's more relevant that we continue and improve our cooperation with the voluntary sector, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes, I think I'm summing up. Sometimes we have, we don't have that many people there, and I think by concentrating it with the voluntary sector, we should get more. You make the point that there are cabinet members on it at the moment, but that's not set in stone. Any member can be a member of the voluntary sector joint liaison committee. So I can't see the point in arguing that they are only talking to cabinet members. They just happen to be at the moment. In terms of the Glamorgan Voluntary Services, we had discussions with them, and they were very happy with the situation, because they too have several meetings, and they all, as I said, already meet with health. As far as I'm concerned, I think this is the proper way forward. We will also have representation from the town and community councils, and therefore I still say that a lot of work has been done, and I think this is probably a more positive way forward than we were in the past.
I'll bring you in a minute. I've got another speaker, Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, I'm not going to oppose this, and I'm pleased to see us leading the way in Wales as such on this, because it's definitely the way to go, the way forward, as the leader says. And I also recognise the important and good and excellent work the third sector do out in our community. Just two questions I'd like to ask for a bit of clarity is the compact legally binding, and what happens when a body breaches the compact? Thanks.
I couldn't give you a legal answer, but basically if somebody signs a compact, then they sign it and therefore abide by it. I don't think it's a legally binding contract. I don't think it could possibly be that. It's a voluntary compact where you would expect all parties to participate. If they, for any reason, one party decided that he didn't want to cooperate, one, they either wouldn't turn up, or two, they would ask us to revise the compact. If you want a definitive answer, I'm sure that the monitoring officer could possibly supply one to you and everybody else. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a voluntary. It isn't set in stone. It isn't legally binding. It is one where like-minded parties come together in order to work together for a common aim. And indeed, that is what is being proposed tonight.
Councillor Johnson, point of clarification.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, because the leader said that we can talk to them through the scrutiny committee system. However, as Vice Chair of the Healthy Living and Social Care Committee, I recently made a request for members of the Health Board to come and talk from their Estates Department about their hospital car parking policy, and they refused to attend. So that option is not always open on the side of the Health Board.
That's not a point of clarification, though. Right.
Well, in terms of that, I think I'm making heavy weather of this personally, but in terms of that, even if they were members of the voluntary sector compact, and you wanted them to come and talk to you about something they didn't want to come and talk to you about, they wouldn't turn up. Yeah. End of story.
Right. Okay. Council are asked to approve. Happy to accept? Thank you. 10D then. This is my favourite one. Treasury Management and Investment Statement.
Yeah, it's one of mine as well. I should say before we go forward through this, this has actually been through Audit Committee on the 20th of February. And one of the things that they did was endorsed the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy. But one of the things that was also interesting was recently some members had some training on this. We did some member training where we had one of our experts come in, and I can't remember where they were from. Our Treasury Management Company, sorry, I don't know the names. But one of the things that audit did ask is that the training session would be rerun. I think that's a particularly good idea. It was very interesting. It did give people insight on as to what this was about. Whether or not we do it in this term of office, or whether or not we make sure that it forms part of the training that new members and returning members get after the elections, maybe would probably be the best idea. And I don't know if you agree with that as chair of audit. Okay, good. Basically, this is an interim report of the council's treasury management from April to December, and it's the proposed treasury management and annual investment strategy. The Welsh Government provide the council with general capital funding. That advises us the amount of borrowing we have and the amount that they're prepared to fund via the revenue support grant. It doesn't mean that we can't borrow more, but if we do, then we have to, authorities have to have guidance in place and protocols in place. We have to have regard to the Prudential Code, which is developed by SIPFA, and they have key objectives in the Prudential Code. Things have to be affordable, they have to be within prudent and sustainable levels. They have to be in accordance with professional good practice. That code of practice also requires us to approve a treasury management strategy before the start of each year, which is what we're doing here. The code of practice and legislation also requires the council to set the treasury management strategy and to prepare an investment strategy. And the Welsh Government then has guidelines, so many guidelines and protocols we have to go through, also requires the council to approve the investment strategy before the start of each financial year, which is what we're doing here. But they also ask us to do it in a single strategy document covering the requirements of both SIPFA and the code and the guidance that they set forward. Basically, what we've been proposed tonight is two parts. One is the treasury management strategy, which covers the rolling programme of 3 years. And that's obviously intended to link with the medium-term financial plan. Makes sense. The other thing is the investment strategy, which covers the next financial year. So basically, we have a proposed strategy. All our investments, as people have found out, were with either the Bank of England or local authorities. We also use credit rating agencies, so we're very risk averse, if you want to put it that way, but we make sure that we don't suffer any risk. There's also the other thing we have to put together is the interim report. And the interim report is the council's treasury management operations for the period April to December, and that has to be in accordance with the approved strategy. The table on top of page 3 shows what borrowings we have. Currently, we have borrowings of £158,599,000. What it also shows is the investment and for the period 31st to the 31st of December 2016. And that again is set out on the bottom of page 3, shows we have invested money of £73,800,000. Well, so one thing I needed to actually address as well is that when this report went to Cabinet, there was a mistake on paragraph 20. It did say that we should use the CFR method, but basically what we should be using is the regulatory method. If you have got the copy of the report, it explains exactly what they are. It's covered, it covers the annual minimum revenue provision, so basically it was a typographical error. What I'd like to say in terms of this is that this sets out who we borrow from, who we lend to, the strategy, and actually sets the rates by which we have to adhere. So in other words, you have a risk, you can't go above it. And the resolutions on paragraph, on page 4 and 5, I will formally move that the council recommend the revenue provision for 17-18 be approved. I also recommend to council that the proposed 16-17 treasury management and investment strategy be approved, including the following specific resolutions, and they're laid out, but the authorised limit for external debt, the operational boundary for external debt, the section 15 officer be granted delegated authority in those circumstances set out, and that we have set upper limits set for the fixed interest rate exposure. We set an upper limit set for the variable interest exposure, and the upper limits and for the total principal sums are laid out, invested over 364 days. The amount projected borrowing that is fixed that is fixed rate maturing in each period is covered in the table on page 5, and that we again confirm that the prudential indicators set out in Appendix 1 are approved, and that the Treasury Management Policy set out in Appendix 2 are approved. I'm sorry, it's boring, it is, but we have to do it. So can I formally move?
Okay. Council happy to approve? Yes. Thank you. That brings us on to 10E then, the final housing revenue account budget proposals.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be hoarse. Basically, this is the final housing revenue account. We've been asked to carry out 3 things, basically. One is to set the budget. 2 is to set the rents. And 3 is to set other charges. Again, through legislation, each local housing authority is required to keep a housing revenue account and to set a budget for their housing revenue account on an annual basis. So this is it. We also have to ensure that when we set that budget, it is not in deficit at the end of the year. During the course of the year, it's reviewed, and clearly it will continue to be reviewed to make sure that it never goes into deficit. The other thing we should also ensure is that each authority has a working balance on the housing revenue account to make sure that if there are any exceptional circumstances, we can deal with the problem. In terms of the basis of the rent increase, that is actually set by Welsh Government policy for social rents, and they have currently set it at in line with CPI, which is CPI 1% plus 1.5%. Very technical, plus £2. So basically what we're asking council to do is to follow that, which would be 2.5% plus £2. So CPI is 1% plus 1.5%, so it's 2.5% plus £2. This has obviously not changed since the initial housing revenue account, so it went through scrutiny. The Housing Scrutiny Committee went through corporate, what we call it now, corporate performance and corporate resources and performance. So I don't think there's particular issues in it. In terms of the base budget, the base strategy for 17-18 is outlined in the report that went there. The HRA is ring-fenced, as you have to remember that, and any growth has to be funded from the balance. One of the things that we asked every time during the budgets is whether or not any cost pressures, and none were put forward this year. We do anticipate that the draft 30-year housing business plan will be reported to Cabinet in March. It says in this report that we're waiting for the latest guidance. They've actually been received, I think, this week. So that will be going to Cabinet shortly. And I assume it will have to come back to, well, I know it has to come back to council, but I assume it will come back in April. So basically we got recommendation 1, which is the proposed budget for the year, which was at Appendix 1 to the report. That is primarily, the summary is on page 3. The table shows you that there would be a surplus at the end of the year of £131,000 on the housing revenue account. We've carried out the normal changes. So basically we're meeting the targets. In terms of the proposed rent increases, as I said, we have to meet the requirements of Welsh Government. That shows that it's 2.5% plus £2. The table on page 5 shows you the average, the target rents and the average rents. In terms of the other charges, because we have lots of other charges we have to charge for too, they are listed like garage rents, TOLO, etc. They're listed on page 5 and take you all the way to page 7. So they are as set out. Therefore, what I will recommend is that the HRA budget for 17-18 is outlined below, which gives a balance, a surplus at the end of the year of £131,000 and a carried forward working balance of 831 as on page 8. That the rent increases are 2.5% plus the maximum of £2, as set out in paragraphs 16 to 18 of the original report. That the increase suggested for the other services, again as set out in paragraphs 19 to 31 of that report, are agreed, and that the following charges for 17-18 financial year be recommended to Council on a 50-week basis, and they are listed on pages 8 and 9. which takes you down to the cesspool emptying. And finally, if we agree those, that we have to agree that all the changes to the rents and service charges be implemented from the 3rd of April 2017, and that increased notices be sent to tenants 28 days in advance of the new charges coming into effect. On that basis, it was there as the initial report, it went to committee, it hasn't changed, and you will getting the 30-year housing business plan at Cabinet and to the next council, I hope in April. So can I formally move?
Formally second. Yeah. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's only a minor point, Leader. On page 5, you've got the word total there.
Yeah.
Should that actually be median rent or average?
Page, sorry. Sorry.
The word total in the...
Right. If you look at the top of the column, it's the proposed average target rent. So it's the average rent which is targeted. Maybe it does make a mistake. It's told it shouldn't be total. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, what it is a means of saying this is it for bungalows, flats, houses. But if you average it out, this is going to be the average rent. But it's not the total. I agree with you. We'll change it next time.
Thank you. Council happy to accept? Thank you. 10F then is the final capital proposals for 2017-18 to 2021-22. Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, we've been asked tonight to finalise the capital proposals, and again, we've been asked to do a couple of things, 6 things altogether. The first one is to set the 17-18 capital programme from 17-18 to 21-22. Recommendations 2 to 5 actually set out certain delegations within the budget itself. And recommendation 6 changes the capital programme from 16-17 to 21-22, which seems maybe a bit strange, but basically when I go through this, and I'll try and go through it as quickly as I can, some of the things that we've put in place for this year, 16-17, are not going to be addressed, and therefore we need to via them, but we will via them, and some of them are being vied over more than 1 year. So basically, this looks at the budget for this year. They're not going to be addressed this year, so we're moving them on. The initial capital programme went to the 14th of November Cabinet. There were no specific recommendations that came back as a result of that from any scrutiny committee. And indeed, the corporate performance and resources, now it's written down, I know what it is, endorsed it. In terms of the initial proposals, obviously we were working on draft figures. On the 21st of December, the Welsh Government announced the final 17-18 general capital funding settlement. There'd only been, in this case, a £14,000 reduction in funding from 2016-17. Now, if you remember in the medium-term financial plan, we assumed there might be a 10% reduction, and we've been doing that for a while. We still think there's going to be a reduction, but because in the last couple of years it's been flatlined, we decided to maybe change that assumption to make it a reduction of 5% year on year to 21-22. As a result of that, there will be some changes in terms of the knock-on effect throughout the programme. And on that basis, we've put on paragraph on page 2 the assumptions, the new assumptions of Welsh funding, just for people to be aware of it. The reason that we have that funding from Welsh Government is so that we can carry out capital schemes. But so that funding is used for those specific purposes. Now, it's not the only way that we can actually pay for capital schemes, and the report goes into some detail as how we can do that. We can use capital receipts, but there's a proviso there, is that if there's a receipt from a council, from a housing revenue, then it has to be spent within the housing revenue account, so that's ring-fenced. As of March 2017, we have some usable capital receipts, and that's on the top of page 3, and it currently totals £6,085,000. But you should realise that some of those capital receipts are ring-fenced for social services and education. And indeed, the table before you recognises that. It shows that of the 6 million, call it that for the time being, currently allocated as usable reserves, 1.327 million are for social services and 1.299 million are for education. There are further ring-fenced amounts, because when we selling some of the land which were education, we have agreed that that goes into the school investment strategy. So there will be a further £9 million coming into that. So that shows you the usable reserves. But the point that I think needs to be addressed too is that that we have usable reserves of 6 million currently, but by March 2023, those reserves will have been used, and there are only £236 million left. So they're reducing to that. The other way that we can fund capital schemes is through revenue contribution, and that would come from the general fund. But there's a big but here. Once you've spent it, you've spent it. Once they've gone, they've gone. In terms of other funding pots we do have some pots that we put in place. For example, the project fund. The project fund is something we put in place so that we can borrow from, we pay back to. And if you have a look on page 4, that shows where the project fund sits this year, again until 2022. There is again a proviso in terms of that, in that we would always try to keep a balance of £2 million in there, because again, if there's something takes place, something unforeseen, we've got the money. Again, in terms of other funds, we have an IT fund. We can fund capital expenditures through Section 106. And indeed, if you look in the report later on, we're actually doing that, and you know we're doing that because as local members, you're always consulted if Section 106 is used. We have specific grants from Welsh Government. We have an estimate of the next 5 years of £67 million worth of grants in the next 5 years. But they will be made up of things like 21st Century School, the flood defence and structure grants, the major repairs allowance, and let's not forget 5 Mile Lane. So they're paying for that. So they're grants specifically for those purposes. Finally, we can borrow, and again, we talked about that in terms of the Treasury Management Report, so I'm not going to go through that, but we obviously have to meet the Prudential Code. And on page 6, it talks about the prudential borrowing and how you go through it and the amount that there would be. We will be carrying out some prudential borrowing over the next 5 years, and if you look on page 6, then the total until 2021-22 will be £27 million. But 23.5 million of that is relating to housing improvements, and 2 million in terms of schools. We currently still have prudential borrowing, and that's what the issue at the bottom of page 6 tells us, that as of March 2022, the outstanding prudential borrowing, taking into account those and the current ones, would be expected to be £30 million in the general fund, and more particularly £91 million on the housing revenue account. But we know about that because we had the buyout, and therefore that's why we had to borrow the money through the local government fund. Then on page 7, it talks about, well, we're talking about recommendation 6. And the recommendation 6 talks about the amendments for the 16-17. If you remember, I said we were reprofiling some of the spend, and that's set out below in the table. And they are listed, and they go through to page 9. Things like Barry Comp, Modeler Building, St Joe's, Vehicle Replacement, Coldbrook, Space Project, etc., and Court Road. So then we come to the proposed capital programme for 17-18 to 21-22. It's a proposed 5-year capital programme, and that was set out in Appendix 1 to the report, which, as I said, went to Cabinet and went through the system. Since it went through the initial capital programme, we have made some small amendments, and they're listed on page 9. So instead of actually, I went through how you could finance capital schemes. What this shows you is that we will be financing through different means. We'll be using Section 106 to do it, and they're listed in the middle of page 9. The other thing that we've done is, as part of the transport review, It did mean that we were going to purchase vehicles, but that's now been delayed. We're not going to do that. And there's a table on page 10 which shows you what the difference is. But the proposed programme says that if vehicles are going to be funded, then they could be funded from the Vehicle Renewals Fund, because there's a fund for that, or alternatively they could be leased. And if you look there, it says borrowed, and that should say purchased on the top of page 10. So they could be they could be used to the Vehicle Renewals Fund, they could be leased, they could be purchased using prudential borrowing. Again, you've heard about prudential borrowing. There's also some slippage requested, and again, that's included in Appendix 1. And then finally, if you, or most importantly, if you recall, as part of the initial revenue proposals which went to Cabinet, I pulled some of the recommendations, because at the time it was projected a policy for 16-17 would have a favourable variance of £4 million. In the initial proposal that went to Cabinet, there were proposals to use that money, and I pulled it on the basis that I could see this year's budget is going to be particularly difficult. So we put it into the general fund, and what we agreed at Cabinet was that that sum of 4 million would be set in the general fund, and it would be considered to be allocated either to use a shortfall for the revenue budget, or used for capital schemes, some of which may have been in that original report. And again, it would come here, and that's why it's there. But the other thing we've done as part of the budget setting process is we've gone out to consultation. And some of the things that come in have been quite interesting, things like highways and pavements. So we've reappraised the £4 million, and we've considered that we should still transfer £1 million into the Visible Services Fund to have to carry out additional road and pavement resurfacing over the next 2 years. And again, that's in Appendix 1. In terms of that, that follows on what the consultation wanted us to do. The other thing that was in the original plan, and I think it still should be in there, under the local development plan, there was a site provision must be made for the gypsy and travellers in order for them to move off Hayes Road. In order to do that, we need the money in the budget to do it. So we're proposing, slightly different to what it was originally, £1 million would be set aside in a fund for the gypsy traveller site. Then we further propose a £500,000 is placed in the council building fund. The reason for that is that some of our buildings are getting older. This building has got some work carrying out on it at the moment, as we all know, because there's no heating. So we've decided that because that fund is getting particularly low, we need to top it up. So £500,000 is going in there. And then lastly, £500,000 will be transferred into the Visible Services Fund to finance capital expenditure. The other thing, which is in this report and in the revenue report, is we need to consider various other things. One, we have to consult, which I've talked about, but we also have to bear in mind the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and the corporate plan, which we all agreed. So in order to go forward, we had to review the financial strategy. We know there are a number of pressures, and the pressures are listed on page 12 and 13. Things like the possible increase in flooding, things like the shortfall to address the council's asset renewal requirements, things in relation to the ambitions of further regeneration, because clearly that's one of our policies. Continue with the school investment, and to have the renewal fund areas funding. Now, one of the things that this does too is tells you what the mitigations are. So, and set out below, after on page 13, lists all of those. School investment programme, for example. One of the things you know about is the school investment strategy. We're on Band A schemes. They run until 1819, and Band B is expected to commence in 1920. In terms of the Band A schemes, you know too that we've started construction, and we've carried out things at Ysgol Nantalog, Ysgol Dewi Sant, Ysgol Gwenan Nant, Oakfield, work at Colcott, work at Romilly Primary, and obviously the completion of the Lantwick Learning Community. Quite a considerable amount of work, when you think about it, and investment in this time. In terms of the Band A programmes, as I said, they're progressing well, and there's a report further on page 13. At the top of page 14, you can see the education spend of £77 million between 17-18 and 2022. But I would remind you that not only is the £77 million in there, but we've also already committed £83.5 million, which roughly is about £160 million over the last 10 years. And that's something we should all be really, really proud of. There's also an allocation for the Victorian schools, and that's one of the things which we started to do but needs to be shifted slightly. And that work is now expected to be taking place during 17-18. There's an asset renewal budget, and that's listed at the bottom of page 14. As I said, the Band B schemes commence in 1920 for schools. We have made some submissions, but there is a big proviso here too, is that it's still assumed that there will be 50% funding available from Welsh Government. If it's not, then we're going to have to go back and review it. So in terms of that, the education programme is anticipated, and as I said, it goes on. £77 million is being proposed from now on. We also have the Housing Improvement Plan, and as I said before, that's a 30-year plan. As I said in the capital report, this is one where we will have the draft plan. We now do have the information from Welsh Government, and it will be coming to Cabinet and Council. So we have still, however, in terms of that, and I don't know whether it's changed since the information's come forward, we've assumed that we'll continue to have major repairs allowance of £2.7 million. But clearly we need it in order for the WHQS to continue, and that's part of the issue too. Housing Improvement Plan is again shown in Appendix 1, and if you look at the top of page 17, it shows the funding and the changes of the funding in terms of that of £8.394 million. But if you total, and that's on 2021, if you total all of those up, and if you're wondering where our reserves are going, that roughly equates to just under 60 million quid. So we have a massive improvement plan in terms of housing. The other schemes, we have lots of other schemes, and we've set money aside for that, for things like flood risk management, for barrier regeneration, for disabled facilities grants, etc. So in a nutshell, that's the programme. It's, as I said, it's been well considered. We've considered the favourable variance we had, and therefore what I would like to move is that the final budget proposals for the capital programme for the year 2017-18 to 21-22 as set in Appendix 1 be approved, that the Managing Director, and this is where some of the delegations come in, 2 to 5 is a Managing Director and Head of Finance in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Finance, be granted delegated authority to make additions, deletions or transfers to or from the 17-18 to 21-22 housing programme. Again, in terms of 3, delegation in terms of delegated authority in the same terms of the asset renewal budget as appropriate. Number 4, again, delegated authority in terms of the Victorian Schools budget. 5, again, delegation authority in terms of the Section 106 funded schemes. And then finally, under 6, that we agree the changes to 16-17 and 17-18 to 21-22 capital programme. And they relate primarily to ones I've already mentioned: Romilly, Model Building, St Joe's, Vehicle Replacement, Coldbrook Space and Court Road. I think I'll finish there because I think I've covered most of the points. I'm sorry it takes a long time, but I think everybody has to make sure they know exactly what they're signing up to. So can I formally move?
Councillor Franks?
Thank you for those comments, very interesting. I have a number of questions, please, Leader. I suggest I ask them all in one go. Yes? Thank you. There's reference here to a drop in the school's asset renewal stroke other, and then there's additional schools assets renewal, the line underneath. Now, in the narrative, that is a substantial drop, certainly in year 18-19. Can you confirm that's the case? And can you give an indication of the implications of such a significant drop in asset renewal funding. When we come to Victorian schools, which is a bit of a misnomer, I think, it's really schools before the First World War, as I understand it, but that's a small point. And you lightly touched on this, but my recollection is that in the current financial year, £1.2 million should have been spent on what we call Victorian schools, and nothing was spent, and it's been rolled into next year plus an additional sum. Now, if my understanding is correct, how confident can we be that having failed to spend 1.2 in this year, we'll be able to spend 2 million next year? Turning to Roos Primary, as I understand it, this had been programmed in the past. Turning to Roos Primary, it's my understanding that this was programmed previously and it slipped into 17-18. Can you indicate why that has happened, and how confident are you that this work will be commenced in the forthcoming year? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you much, Leader, for the substantial detail you've gone into on this report. I just wanted a clarification with regards to the Colebrook flood risk management. Now, it's 10 years this year. It was, I think, July 2007 that there's large-scale flooding in Barry, but that work is still going on. Of course, the cost of that has increased. I'm just wondering if you could just clarify the completion date as we currently anticipate it.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah. Can I welcome the budget, especially the increases in expenditure for St Joseph's Primary School in Penarth? What I would ask, though, is can we have some information about the Early Intervention Board on that, because it does make reference to it. Thank you.
Councillor Burton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, thank you for your comments in detail, Leader. I was going to touch on the Colebrook flood management. That's already been covered. But I want to ask about the LED light replacement programme. When is it looking to be commenced? When is it looking to be completed? And will areas with high crime rates be carried out in the first instance? Because Blackwell Close in my ward has been waiting quite some time for their lights to be converted, so the police can actually have a camera that works overnight there. And I think it would be good to cover those areas first.
Thank you. Okay, there's nobody else indicating to speak, so I'm going to ask the Leader to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I will, if I can find my papers again. In terms of the first issue of the asset renewal, I think was the first one, the drop in asset renewal. If you look on page 14, I think it is, what happened in previous years is that we always did have £600,000 as asset renewal year on year on year on year. And I moved it to put some more money in this year. The reason it's come down is because of the constraints on the 21st century schools budgets. So it doesn't mean to say that it's not going to be spent, because it is. What we've done is just reallocated it and vied it, so that if the £600,000 is available to spend, and it's spent, then we would still have an opportunity to actually via more money into it. Now, £600,000 has always been particularly, has been there, not always used, I have to say, because it's a rolling programme and it was just there as a fixed budget. One of the other things in terms of reducing it is because we've actually put money into the Victorian schools. So there's £2 million in terms of that. You asked in terms of the Victorian schools why the proposals haven't gone forward. And that's simply because there's been a lot of specialist stonework consultant work that was required. There's been a full inspection of all the 22 schools to provide detailed schedules of stonework repairs along with the budget estimates for the required works. During this inspection, all the loose stonework was removed from the buildings. The surveys highlighted urgent repairs to 7 schools, including a chimney, a gable wall, high-level coping stones, and these emergency repairs have been completed. The project, in terms of the rest of it, has therefore been vired because we wanted to have the full detail before we set the tenders and work in place. The projects will be split between a number of contractors because there's work to be done to ensure that there's high priority repairs, and they will be completed as early as possible, and all the works will be completed by the end of March 2018. So have I got confidence in it? Yes, I have. In terms of the Roos primary programme that's slipped, I don't have much information in terms of that, I have to say. I know that there was work on it, and what I was looking for, actually, because I've got it here somewhere, is the reports which come to us on a regular basis in terms of the capital monitoring spend to this year. In terms of, if I can find it, Roos, I can't find it. I'll give you an answer to that, Christopher. I'm afraid I can't give you the answer for that, but clearly there's work required there, and it's had to be shifted. But as I understand it, that work is shortly to begin early in the financial year. In terms of the Colebrook catchment, there was a full report that went to Cabinet recently and to the E&R committee. Work is still ongoing. I'm hopeful that it's going to be completed by 2018, early 2019. But that depends, to be honest with you, on what they find. Because currently what's happened is, when they carried out the works in the Colebrook area, in Solent Road, in the Brookfield area, they found things like culverts were full of concrete, which they would never have ever thought would be the case. So they've also had problems with groundworks, and they've also found, in terms of that, services which were in place which were never scheduled and never mapped. So there were issues in terms of that which you could not have normally considered to be the case. So I'm hoping it's going to be finished by 2029 at the latest, but I think if you look in the report that went to Cabinet, and look, 2019, sorry. Well, it could be done by 2029. Yeah. But if you look in the Cabinet report, it does give you a schedule and give you some idea, and I know it went to E&R too. But a definite date, I don't know. In terms of, I think I covered yours, apart from Roos, and if I can find Roos, I'll tell you about that. Hmm?
It's on 12A.
That doesn't help. No. Sorry. In terms of your question, in terms of St. Joe's, the early intervention base would operate as a satellite from Ascol Derry, the special school, and therefore staff would be employed by Ascol Derry, who would be responsible for their management. Pupils attending the early years intervention base would either be on roll at Ascol Derry or their home school at St. Joe's. So in other words, we're putting together the early intervention base, but actually using it as a satellite. And if that works, then we'll see where it goes from there. In terms of the LED lighting, LED lighting contract is, I think, has gone out, and I think if it hasn't gone out, it's about to go out, and I think we've agreed tenders, to be honest. That should start work, if not this month, next month. It'll be rolled out in the same way that the work was carried out in the past, in other words, east to west. However, what we have done throughout this process is, if there were issues that were raised, particularly with the police, of problems in a particular area, then we've addressed them. So whether or not the area you're talking about has been reported to us and been confirmed as being an issue with the police, I don't know. But if it isn't, tell us about it, and if we need to intervene, because we have in some areas, because what we did, if you recall, when we did the LED study, we did a desktop study. And when we did the desktop study, we worked out where we thought were the best places you could turn lights off. One of the things we didn't do was turn them off at junctions, and that's still the case. But in terms of the LED rollout, it will be going from east of the county to the west of the county in the same fashion as it was done originally. I hope that helps. And as far as roofs, Chris, I will have to give you a written answer.
Okay.
Neil. Neil. That's on item 12A.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. He's just pointed out something that on page 2,
On agenda 12A.
on agenda 12A, it says the initial 40-week programme had now been extended with a planned completion date of the 22nd of October. And that's for the Colebrook attachment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Leader.
So it's earlier than I thought.
Okay, Council happy to accept the proposals? Thank you. Moving on then to item 10G, which is the final proposals for the revenue budget for 2018. Leader?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, are we getting the people back in from the...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got 2 councillors waiting to come back in. If somebody can be so kind. Okay, I think we're ready to proceed. Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, I just want to lay some rules, really, about where we are. As you know, Welsh Government indicate what our standard spending assessment is, commonly known as SSA. This year, it went up by about £2.5 million. So the SSA for this year, which is basically says this is the amount you should be spending, was £216,807,000. What I'm proposing is a budget of £215,720, which is 194k short of reaching the SSA. 1,940,000. Yes, okay. Yeah, 1.94. Yeah, okay. If you recall, one of the things that we hoped that we would try and achieve was be to spend to SSA and have a council tax of roughly average in Wales. We've been close, but we haven't got there yet. In terms of the AEF funding, which is the aggregated external funding, which is the Welsh Government funding, which is the revenue support grant plus the non-domestic rates, that this year is £149,554,000, which means that from council tax we have to find £66 million of, which is about 30% of the budget I'm proposing anyway. When we originally did the estimates for the revenue, we were indicated that we thought we were going to have a bit of a flat budget, but when we came out, we thought we were only going to lose about £500,000, £0.53 million. If you see in the report, and if you have the copy of the original report, on paragraph 14 and paragraph 93 gives you where I'm going. On paragraph 93, it shows that when you take into account not only the reduction in the revenue support grant and the non-domestic rates, but the other things that also happens is you have transfers in and transfers out of the budget. It means that our reduction from Welsh Government this year is £1.786 million. If you look at paragraph 93, then that shows where I'm heading with this, because basically what I'm looking at is that if we decide a budget of 215,772 million pounds and take away all the issues, that would leave us with a budget or a council tax increase of 2.8%. So in other words, what we've lost, we're going to pick up in terms of council tax. So we lost 2.8% in terms of our revenue support or our AEF, and I'm proposing that we set the budget at that, which in some respects is a bit of a standstill budget. So, where are we tonight? In terms of the council, we're required under statute to fix a level for council tax, and that has to be done by the 11th of March, so that's why we're here. The proposed budget, as I said, for 17-18 was attached to the original report at Appendix C, and that equated to 250,720,000 pounds after using the usual adjustments that we always do. With things like inflation, which exclude schools, totaled 1.637 million pounds, quite substantial, of which 844 related to general price increases, and also a 1% allowance for pay awards, which amounted to 793,000 pounds. So this went through the capital, the initial revenues went through the scrutiny process as normal. The one committee that picked it up was Councillor Trehen's committee and suggested they wanted to fund all the cost pressures. That subsequently went to corporate performance and to look at it as the lead committee, and they simply noted the report. So basically, it came back to us saying that they noted the report that we had put together. Since then, the Budget Working Group have reviewed and updated the cost pressures because they were substantial, if you recall, at the time. We've reviewed them, and they are now have a net growth of cost pressures of just over £5 million, and that is also attached to Appendix D to the report. Savings have also been reviewed because there were substantial savings, and what we've also done is realise that now it's not going to be possible to have some of the large reshaping services, and therefore we're trying to drive some of that through and require further time to implement them. So what we've done is we've reprofiled those over the next 3 years. So next year, the proposed savings have come down to just over £4 million. As part of the initial revenue proposals, as I said before, when we were going through the capital, there was an adverse variance, a favourable variance of £4 million, and we set that aside because we just dealt with some of that through the capital programme as previously reported. So, and we've agreed some of the options of transferring money to visible services for roads and pavements because of the consultation exercise. And again, because of the consultation exercise, we therefore put in £500,000 to support capital projects in visible services. I've dealt with the Gypsy and Treasurer, and we also set aside money for the council building funds, and we've dealt with all of those. Further details of the schemes were also contained in the final capital programme for 18 report. If you recall, when we've looked at the revenue budget for the year, we've had issues in terms of education, and we've had terms in terms of social services. Education recoupment income is obviously an issue, and the base budget would be increased in 17-18 because this is not going to be found for the full cost of the cost pressure. So we're aware of the pressures that are happening in terms of that, in terms of Ysgol-y-Derry, etc. So it's proposed that £200,000 be transferred into a school placement reserve to cover any potential shortfall while that reshaping work is undertaken. Because as you know, you've had reports to scrutiny that work is ongoing, particularly in terms of ALN, so that gives them time to do the work, but it gives them the buffer. It's also been reported in terms of planning, because of things like Brexit, that planning fee income is unlikely to meet its target. And again, we've considered that, and again, what we propose to do is to cover the possible shortfall, put £100,000 transferred into a planning fees reserve. As I've already stated, the targets for the savings have been reprofiled. So as a result of that, there would be a shortfall in the revenue budget for 17-18. So as recommended in the initial budget proposal, we took some of that £4 million and put it into the general fund to be used to offset capital schemes. But the other thing that I said was possibly to offset the shortfall in the 17-18 budget. And in this case, I am using £700,000, which would have been held in the general fund and will now be used to fund the revenue budget. In terms of the report details and the service of the service heads, they are covered starting on page 3. Shows learning and skills have increased to £999,889,000. It should also be noted, though, that in the past, Welsh Government had a minimum funding commitment that no longer applies. So we've considered that. We've considered in terms of learning and skills, breakdown of the growth, and now it's covered in Appendix D to the report that went there. And the funny thing is, in terms of education, their SSA has decreased by 696 for 2016-17. But what we've still done is allocated more funding to the service. We decided that as a one-off additional cost pressure to the schools, on the same basis for the cost of the rest of the council, that is, we would still be funding, as we've done for the rest of the services, the increase in the non-teaching staff employees superannuation contributions, and also 50% of the apprenticeship levy. 50% would have to be found by them, but that is exactly the same thing that's happening across the council. So £689 has also been provided to contribute to those cost pressures. During the year, we know, as I said, there were pressures in terms of recouping authority recouping money for county and out-of-county placements. So again, we've projected overspends of £793,000 and £268,000 respectively. We've acknowledged the pressure of the area and had allocated a recurring fund, therefore, because of that, of £450,000. And we've also transferred £200,000 into the school placement reserve. However, further work has to go on in order to mitigate it, because we know in the reports that you've had, they're in trouble. The saving breakdown is covered in was covered in Appendix E, and again that talks about savings targets being profiled over 2 years. As usual, the school budget forum will be consulted before any final decision is made on the split of the funding between central education and schools, and we recommend that the delegated authority be given, in this case, to the Director of Learning and Skills, rather than the interim, as it says in there, to determine the split in the light of the consultation. It's also planned as part of the 17-18 budget process, budget for catering services, and you've seen reports in terms of that, in terms of reshaping, would be delegated to schools. Once again, we said we always wanted to spend above education, above the indicator-based assessment, the SSA for education, and yet again, this promise has been made, and this year it would be £3 million above IBA. In terms of social services, again, we know that there's problems in outturn, and there's a projected overspend of £600,000, but that's been offset by income of £400,000 or a surplus of £400,000 from children's services. There still continues to be pressures on the elderly services, and we know that that currently is standing at £1 million. This overspend really relates to domiciliary care packages provided for the frail elderly clients. Again, there was growth in the budget, and that's shown at Appendix B. So we've had regard to the current financial pressures that they're currently in. We've acknowledged that there's significant issues in this area, and and not only because of the increase in population, and there clearly is, but clients are increasingly becoming more frail with complex needs. Therefore, there is a knock-on pressure, which we have considered. We've also seen the pressures, and we've all seen this, on the pressures from service changes in legislation, allegedly neutral, but clearly not. We've also seen pressures from fees paid to residential and domiciliary care providers in 16-17, where they have to increase their fees because of inflation, but also because of the national living wage. And providers have also, again, requested an above inflation increase in 17-18 due to their continued impact on the national living wage. Again, and perversely, the social services SSA has gone down this year. Again, they think our spending should be less of £262,000. I think it's absurd. So what we're proposing is that there's an additional £1.25 million included in their budget for adult services. That should help the situation of the £1 million overspent. But in addition to that, Welsh Government recently announced, and something that I've been pressurising Welsh Government for since, well, ad nauseum, and I know that the Mayor, when he was a Cabinet member, did too, to increase the £60 levy. In fact, this year it's gone up to £70, so that should generate about £250,000 of additional income into the service. When they charge for services, they're now going to charge up to £70 instead of £60, and again, any increase in income will go within that budget. Similarly, in terms of the delivery of the transformation grant, which is a grant from Welsh Government, that's been transferred into the rate support grant, and again, we worked in collaboration with Cardiff in terms of that. We hosted that particular grant, and what is proposed is, even though it's in the rate support grant, we will continue that collaboration work, and we'll continue to be the host. In terms of the intermediate care fund, more money that comes in from Welsh Government, but instead of coming to us as it did, it goes to health. So we have to work with health in order to ensure that we get as much money as we can and as much spent as effectively as possible. In January, the Minister for Social Service and Public Health announced an additional £10 million for social care funding. Now, how that's going to be allocated, we're not absolutely sure. We think that it could be allocated on the basis of the older person's residential and domiciliary care SSA formula, and if that's the case, that could give us about £370,000, or give social services £370,000. And again, we're suggesting that that's going to be added to the social services budget. Clearly, there are savings, and there have been ongoing savings for years, as we all know. So we have to be more efficient, more effective. And the savings are shown in Appendix E. They had previously shown, however, and this is another one, they were, and they'd been for year on year, savings of £270,000 for domiciliary care and reductions in that. We know domiciliary care, as I said, is under pressure, so what we've decided to do is remove that saving altogether from the budget. So they don't have to make that saving, therefore that buffers them too. Again, if you recall, we set up originally in 2012-13 a budget program, a social services budget program, and set up a social services fund which allowed them to tap in order to keep them solvent. And again, on page 7, you can see that funds are still being used in terms of that, and over the next 2 years, £980,000 will be spent on that. However, and I will say, however, there still has to be a review of the budget, because we have no alternative. In terms of environment and housing, again, we're putting in £28 million into that. A breakdown of the growth is at Appendix D, again, to the report. And again, as part of the consultation process with residents, waste collection service was brought forward as an issue. So we thought it was appropriate to support the increased costs and pressures of the waste collection and recycling service. And again, we don't know where we're going to be with the blueprint in terms of that. If they push us down the blueprint, I think it's madness. We currently have mixed collection, as you know. We're one of the second best in Wales and probably one of the cheapest in Wales. So I'm hoping that that won't be put on us, but if they do, then there will be cost pressures too. In terms of savings, that's carried out in Appendix E, and the reshaping services, again, had targets of £1.9 million for 17-18. Again, we decided to reprofile those over 2 years. In terms of the Managing Director and resources, £30 million is put in there. There was some growth in terms of Appendix D. One of the things we've added into there is some of the things that have happened today is the Cardiff Capital Region City deal was signed, and so we've allocated as an indication for this year, £50 million, that's £50,000, included for 17-18 to contribute towards that. We've also got a budget of £60,000 introduced to include for staff costs as part of the renewal area budget, which was required to support the capital bid, which has been included as part of the capital programme. We put a bid in, we're successful, we've got to put money in. Again, savings in terms of Appendix E, and again, they will be, there are some in tranche 2, some have commenced, but again, we are reprofiling them. In terms of the capital budget too, we have to go through the consultation process, looking at the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act and the corporate plan. So if you go forward to the financial strategy, in 14-15, we put in those strategies for education, social services, and then other services. We're continuing with that, so there's no change. So you've heard where we are. Now, in terms of, the reason I pulled that £4 million originally from the budget, because I could see it was going to be hard. But if you think this is going to be hard, then you want to wait what's coming next. Because all indications that I've had, when talking to the Cabinet Secretary, is this was a good year. If this was a good year, we could be in trouble in the future. So Welsh Government haven't provided with an indicative settlement for the figures onwards, but the medium-term financial plan does still show a reduction of 3% year on year, and we will continue to do that. And it has to be reminded that when the AEF is reduced, as it was this year, 1% equates to £1.5 million, which equates to just over 2% council tax rise. We've included in the budgets pay and inflation. That's in the report on page 11. The savings are at Appendix F, and again we talked about the Reshaping Services programme. We still have a long way to go in terms of that. In terms of cost pressures, they're in Appendix, if I can find it, Appendix G to the report, and that shows that there's £4.6 million for 18-19 and 19-20. There have been obviously possible levels of funding for schools, and there are pressures on social services, and I've said we've dealt with those and things like the living wage. Allocations have also been included for housing in recognition of the reduction in the transition grant funding in order to support the homeless and prevention services. The budget proposals therefore use the £700,000, as I said, to balance the budget. But there still remains, as I said earlier, uncertainty about Brexit, what inflation is going to happen. We have to look at the reshaping services, and that being the case, it is a possibility, and you need to accept it, that we may have to use the council fund in order to prop the budget up in the future. But we have to be mindful of the Section 151 officers' requirement to keep £7 million in that fund. So, at the moment, that's where we are. There are financial projections in terms of the council tax increases for the 2 years, and they're covered on page 12. In terms of every year, we look at the reserves, and everybody goes on about, look how many reserves you got, but what you have to understand is reserves are a way of setting aside funds for budgets you know you're going to need, and also security for levels of expenditure that you know you're going to have. We've always taken a prudent approach with regard to specific reserves. We have benefited from them, but it's taken a long time to get there. The levels of reserves have been considered in the context of the financial risk, and we are looking at them, and they have been revised, and they will continue to be revised at least twice a year. The thing that we have to realise is, we have to reiterate, is that we don't know what's coming from Welsh Government in the future. We don't know what's happening in terms of the savings that we need. The savings identified so far for the next 3 years are £18 million, £18.7 million, of which 11.5 have been identified, but we have to make them. So it's difficult challenges. We have risks of not achieving those savings. We have risks of social services. We have risks from inflation. We have risks from specific grants being withdrawn. We have legislative risks because if there's legislation and we have to deal with it, no money coming in, that's a risk. Living wage goes up, welfare reform. Year on year, we've said there's a problem with welfare reform. Luckily, it hasn't kicked in so much yet, but this year it has in some of our areas, particularly housing and those areas. So we did try to keep ourselves a buffer, if you recall. So that is still a risk. And there's still a risk in terms of housing transitional funding too. We have risks in terms of, we talked about flooding earlier on, climate change, energy costs go up. And I got to emphasize that these large proportional reserves are held for well reasons. We have to develop our schools, we have aging premises, we have to have an IT infrastructure policy. Wales Audit Office tells us we have. As always, we've looked at the reserves and I said we will continue to do so. I have to confirm that levels of the council fund, even though we take some money out of it, will still be at £8.5 million, so well above the £7 million requested by the 151 officer, and I know the chief still considers that to be a reasonable minimum. In terms of school balances, there are some school balances unspent, and they're covered on page 16. But you can also see that there's going to be a large fall of our level of reserves, if you look at those, in the next 3 years. So I refer you again to paragraphs 14 and 93 of the report, which are again there. We had a shortfall in our AEF of £1.786 million, which equated to 2.8% council tax. And therefore, in order to recoup that, what I am suggesting this year is a budget increase of 2.8% and a budget of £215.72 million, including a provision of £200,000 for discretionary rate relief to rural shops and post offices and charitable organisations. That the budgets for 17-18 are set out in the report in Appendix C, as attached to the report and before you tonight is agreed, and that reaches the total of £250 million. That the recommendations regarding the net growth for 17-18 are set out in Appendix D, attached to the report, and the savings for 17-18 as set out in Appendix E to the report to Cabinet is approved. That the council tax set for 2017 be set for its own purposes, excluding, I remind you, police and town and community council precepts, at the level set out there, which shows a band D rating of £1,142.37. And finally, that the proposed draft report on education budget and indicator-based assessment attached to Appendage A to the original report be endorsed, and that the Director of Learning and Skills make arrangements for it to be forwarded to the school's budget forum. I formally move.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ian Johnson.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you much, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with a simple fact. If this budget and council tax rise as agreed, then the Vale of Glamorgan Council, under Labour and the Philanthropic First Independence, will have increased council tax by 21.5% in the past 5 years. That's an increase from £940 for a Band Z property in the 2012-13 year to £1,142 in 27-18, more than £200 greater and more than £30 more this year alone. Now, in setting their precept, the leader of Barry Town Council, a Labour-run council, said in the Barry District News, "We are not asking people to go into their pockets when people in Barry are struggling to put food on the table." That's clearly not been the approach of her Labour councillors here on the Vale, who have consistently increased both council tax and reserves whilst pleading poverty and blaming others. That today's increase is being blamed on the gap of their own Welsh Government says it all for deflection tactics. I don't see why 2.8 is the magic number. After all, £700,000 is being put in reserves. Mr. Mayor, this 21.5% increase is far higher than inflation, far higher than borrowing costs in the same period, which have been close to historic lows. That's the context in which this is taking place. There's little point, actually, in discussing the detail of the budget and associated figures, because they are a chimera, a will-o'-the-wisp. Last year, we spent a lot of time discussing the £2 million increase in council tax. We actually ended up collecting £2 million more, and as the leader has previously explained, in both the capital and revenue budgets, policy ended up £4 million higher. So our discussion about £500,000 between the Plaid Cymru amendment and what was passed was fairly meaningless. There was no need for an increase at all. In spite of that, I've sat through meetings where we've been told that 40,000 can't be found for Meals on Wheels. I've been told that despite requests from myself and the PCSO and the Mayor, that we don't have £10,000 for alley gates in wards. But we do have room now for this largesse that's coming through, this £4 million. We've talked about the reserves. That's what the leader says. The reason that we talk about reserves is because I've banged on about this for the last 5 years. And in each year I've been on the council, there has been a difference of £15 million between the figure that's been provided to this budget meeting on specific reserves and what is actually there on the 31st of March. To remind councillors, we were told this time last year our specific reserves were around £47.5 million, but the figures in front of us now say it's £65 million. £17.5 million difference. A reminder also that council estimates in March 2013 at this point in time were that we would have our specific reserves of £20 million by March 17. Bear this in mind when we discuss our reserves. A pessimist is never disappointed. The point is, though, that we shouldn't be taking money from our citizens if it's not needed for us to do so. That's the point that was being made at Barry Town Council. It's a point I reiterate tonight. Actually, we are in a very good position, and that is thanks to the hard work of people sat along the back road tonight who are our directors. I will point to another misleading figure. It's funny because it's usually quoted that we have a Band D figure which is close to the Wales average. The Band D council tax is used as a multiplier, the yardstick against which all other council tax bands are calculated. But it has no meaning for comparison because the council tax base across Wales has very different numbers in each category, in each band. Our Band D figure may be close to the Welsh mean average, but we have a far higher number of higher value properties here. In fact, the average Vale household pays £200 more in council tax than the Wales average. We pay the second highest amount per dwelling in Wales after Monmouthshire, and the second highest percentage of council tax of any local authority. Well done, Labour. For the same reason, a comparison of percentage increases also has little meaning. The higher the current council tax base, the greater real increase rise it is per extra percent, which is why you can have 5% in the first year of this Labour-led administration, and yet you can have less going up, but still the amount goes up by the same amount, because actually the council tax is already there. Now, the Conservatives, of course, have shown no budget strategy at all in recent years in this council. In fact, they've called both for no increase in council tax and no use of our reserves. I can only assume they intend either wholesale privatisation of Vale services, something which was being questioned by Councillor Thomas last year, and or wholesale cuts. Perhaps both, who knows. The fact they've not tabled a single question tonight to Cabinet on public services shows how little interest they have in those services, and this is 2 months from an election. Mr Mayor, Plaid Cymru tonight are proposing no increase in council tax. Instead, we will use the reserves that we have, in the full expectation that, like last year, they will not be required. That means that £4.86 million would be in our council fund reserve this year. More importantly, no increase for our council taxpayers. Now, this year, the Labour administration is suggesting £700,000 be used from our council fund reserve. Last year, it was happy with 1.5 million. Why is it not doing so again? Why not do 1.5 million and have a smaller amount in council tax? Why so insistent on that 2.8%? It could be lower. It could be around 1.5%, even on the same as you were doing last year. But no, that's not what you've done, is it? You've insisted on 2.8%. Now, that's a fully funded use of council fund reserves would take us just below £7 million. But it would still take us just above the amount that was being projected by your administration in 2013. We would still have more money now than we would under your projections at that point. I'd therefore like to move, Mr Mayor, that the council fund, in point 2 of the recommendations tonight, that council fund reserve be 2.486 million, that's rather than 700,000, and that the council tax for 2017-18 be set for its own purposes, excluding police and town and community council precepts, the same as last year. So at Bandsy, that's £1,111.23, and the rest calculated accordingly. I would also ask that there be a recorded vote on this matter. This allows us a balanced budget. Thank you.
Fine. Yeah, there'll be a recorded vote. Councillor John Thomas is next to speak. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the leader for his comprehensive explanation of the budget. But I'm sure it won't be any surprise to him that my group will be opposing the budget, as we do believe that the council tax increase is not acceptable. And we feel that not enough has been done to find savings, and that the reshaping services agenda is not delivering the required savings. But all that has come out of reshaping services is the converting the libraries to community libraries, and this has only happened with the goodwill of the communities. Running up to the last election, the Labour Party promised to bring back the mobile libraries, and this has never happened, and now they've cut the funding to the regular libraries. As I've said before, there appears to be no appetite within the executive for outsourcing services to the private sector. The last Conservative administration outsourced the leisure centres, and this is held up as a great success of this council. But as yet, nothing else has happened. And once again, we come back to the same problem, which is the lack of funding which this council receives from Welsh Government. We're not asking for much, just for funding on an equal basis to our neighbouring authorities. I know the leader will say that the formula was put in place by a Conservative Welsh Secretary, but surely, after 18 years of Welsh Government, led by Labour, and with input from time to time from Plaid Cymru, this should surely have been sorted out by now. And Labour and Plaid will obviously blame the Westminster Government for austerity. I know it hasn't been mentioned yet. I'm surprised that Councillor Johnson didn't bring it up, because he's normally on his list. But I think the result of the recent Copeland by-election shows that the public can actually see the need for austerity and the reasons why we are having to go through it. It begs the question of how many millions of pounds of savings made by local authorities would not have been made if it wasn't for austerity. And finally, can I commend the leader for bringing this report and the council tax report together onto the same agenda this year, as it will hopefully avoid the usual farce of having an identical debate in 2 consecutive council meetings. Thank you.
Councillor Riley.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make this brief because much of what I've got to say has already been covered. But clearly these are difficult times for councils, but we mustn't forget that they're also difficult times for the people of the Vale of Glamorgan. Expecting local taxpayers to just pick up the tab for the reduction of the Welsh Government funding lacks imagination, and it looks really bad, like we treat the people of the Vale as a cash cow. We cannot do that. 2.8% increase, that's well in excess of the rate of inflation. 17-18 savings identified of £4 million. That's about 2% of the proposed budget. Will the people of the Vale think that this is good enough in terms of identified savings? The specific reserves are said to be adequate, but does this mean that they're suitable at those levels? What assurances do we have that the current level of reserves is not already excessive, and that it's not actually possible to utilise the current reserves to reduce the amounts that are passed on and that we're expecting the local taxpayers to pick up?
Thank you. Councillor Franks.
Thank you. I'm grateful to Councillor Thomas to prompt me to mention the work of my colleagues in the Assembly, because I might have not mentioned that thanks to Plaid Cymru, there's £25 million extra gone into local government due to our influence in the Assembly. Due to the influence of the Conservatives, not one single penny extra has gone into local government in Wales. Now, you've got to ask how robust... are we allowing people to
no,
barrack? Thank you. How robust is this budget? We've heard mention that there's been a failure to even attempt to save the £7 million, and that has been reduced to £4 million. So suddenly there's £3 million extra in the budget by a stroke of a pen almost. That does not fill me with confidence. The increase in the reserves. Now we've heard the huge increase, but when I try to find that in the budget, if it's there, it's disguised very, very cleverly. But let's be clear, the difference, the growth in reserves from this time last year to today is something in the order of £17 million extra. £17 million. Now that is a staggering amount. And there has been no real explanation why the budget is so out of control that these two strands have been allowed. Digging in a little bit deeper, I don't recall reference being made to the reduction in post-16 income, and there we can lay the fault at the door of the Labour Party in the Assembly. And as I understand it, our schools, especially Barry schools, will be very badly affected with the cut in post-16 education income. So, though one thing I certainly did agree with the leader is his description that the Labour government in Cardiff is absurd. I'll certainly endorse that comment, leader. So, we heard in the previous debate regarding the capital budget that there's slippage with Roos Primary School. There's delays with repairing 20 of our older schools, the Victorian schools as they're called. And there's a drop in funding for asset management. And we're told that this is a good year. I wonder why this year is a good year. Can anyone give me an idea why this year's next year's budget? Oh, you're not allowed to barrack. No, you probably don't understand actually. But you do have to ask: is this budget being manipulated purely for electoral reasons? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Councillor Penrose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first again point out the ineffectiveness of this chamber when, thanks to Councillor Williams, after waving for several minutes, we get noticed behind the rows of seats. Perhaps if we can't alter the chamber, we could issue with flags that we can wave to attract attention, but it is very difficult. The independent group will not be supporting any motion for increasing council tax by 2.8% for the following reasons. And having been beaten to the punch by Cymru, I hate to admit we'll probably be joining them in their motion. Firstly, this Labour administration has continually over the past 5 years increased the level of council tax by blaming both Welsh Government and Westminster for reducing the funding levels of authority. However, this time, this excuse cannot realistically be used if one believes the publicity put out by Welsh Government that only showed a 0.7% reduction in our funding, although the leader is coming out with a different set of figures. Secondly, this Labour administration has failed to reach its published savings targets and in some instances overspent in areas such as education and social servicing, having to draw on its reserves to eliminate the deficits. Thirdly, this administration has failed to really implement its Reshaping Services programme, which to date, having read the most recent report, seems to be full of mission statements with little or no achievements, with perhaps the only exception being community libraries where the impetus was driven by the stakeholders. Accordingly, we do not consider that the council taxpayer should have to pay the extra to bail out such obvious inefficiencies, and to that end we are also endorsing the motion for a zero increase in council tax for the period 2017-2018, funded by the new administration hopefully, setting more ambitious saving targets, a rapid acceleration of the reshaping services, and a draw from the reserves in the interim. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Birdie.
I'd like to formally second that or support Clyde's motion that's put before us tonight. No problem in that. One thing that is for sure is that you've been consistent in your approach with your hikes whilst controlling this council, Mr. Mayor. And surprise, surprise, yet again, another inflation busting increase. And as I've learned on the doorsteps, this is really hitting people hard in the pocket. Now, I really do hope voters remember this come May's election. Yes, another hard-hitting punch from Labour. Plus, on top of this hefty rise, we also have a hefty rise from the Labour Police Commissioner too. I think it's about 5%. Ouch. In all, this is yet another sting for local residents. It is neither reasonable nor fair to the taxpayer. We should be using the reserves, Mr. Mayor. There is simply no need to take money from the taxpayer and rob them. We need better management and leadership, and I hope we see change come May, because the Vale desperately needs it, Mr. Mayor. Incidentally, you claim you have no money, yet it looks like you're bribing the electorate with playgrounds, including claiming you were delivered to in my ward, which I can tell you were done before you came to power. So talk about trying to claim the credit, and that was with my influence and input. So no, I certainly will not be supporting yet another inflation-busting council tax hike by the Labour and their buddies Lamp-Wick First administration. It is simply wrong. And I will highlight there is no need for an increase, and I certainly will not be supporting one, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Councillor Jeff James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo the sentiments expressed by our leader of the group and by many others who are concerned about the increase in council tax. I'd like to focus on paragraph 92 in relation to the SSA. And in respect of this, clearly the SSA, which is set by the Welsh Government, which is based on a formula that they've decided, does disadvantage the Vale of Glamorgan and the people of the Vale of Glamorgan. And indeed, the report, in fairness, does make that clear. My concern is, Mr. Mayor, what are we doing to try and redress that? Because clearly, if that balance was, if that SSA was given on the same level as other authorities, Rhondda, Taff, Caerphilly, etc., Bridgend, I think that, you know, the Vale of Glamorgan would be much better off. And we probably could arrive at a situation where we might not have to increase our council tax by quite as much. So my question is, Mr. Mayor, of the leader, what has the leader done to approach and lobby the Welsh Government, the Minister for Finance or the First Minister, or indeed speak to the Secretary of State for Wales to see whether the Westminster Government could offer any additional resources to cover the fact that this council and other councils who are affected by the poor standard of the SSA assessment is actually missing out. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor Marnie.
Thank you very much. Well, it's just like deja vu, isn't it? Every year I keep saying the same things. I don't see why the Vale of Glamorgan residents should be so substantially hard done by in the settlement of Welsh Government. The massive, massive discrepancy that's given per head to adjoining councils compared to us. And I keep asking you every year, I never get a reply, quite frankly. Why aren't you lobbying and fighting for the right of Vale residents with the Welsh Assembly? We know that many, many millions of pounds have been sent from Westminster to the Welsh Assembly, specifically to freeze or reduce council tax rises throughout Wales, and has been kept by them instead of being passed on. All the while they're doing this, perhaps when you could go to them, you could point out to them, why have they kept that money instead of distributing it in the way it was intended? At the same time, we've watched the Labour First Minister chartering a plane for £10,000 to go and watch a football match in the European Championships. We've watched 60 AMs take an 18% pay rise of a minimum of £10,000 a year. It seems there's no austerity for them while they're keeping that money, but the people of the Vale of Glamorgan, and presumably other councils also, have to not only foot the bill for that, but take the consequences. When are you actually going to fight for the right of Vale residents to get a fairer deal compared with neighbouring councils? Thank you.
I've now had two other councillors indicating to speak. I'm going to take those, and I think I'll go back to the leader then to answer some of the questions, and then we'll move to the vote on Plaid's motion. Councillor Liz Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to make a couple of points on this. I think, as the leader mentioned, we will be funding both social services and education at 3 million above SSA. This is a budget for the future of our children, and a dignified future for our most vulnerable. We all agreed the capital programme just now, but yet we say then, oh, we better start taking money out of reserves. Well, how do people think that we're actually going to fund that capital programme? If we're going to build schools, we need to have put money away in reserves first. And that's where we look. Just look at the tables that have been in front of you. We talk about where the blame should lie. We just know there's a lot of money. You can argue about where the blame lies, but I would actually say read your local government magazines and look maybe at the one area that we can compare with where Tories are in power, which is in England. The council tax levels in England are far above Wales. Education. Look at what's happening with academies in England and whether they can build schools without having to go out to PFI arrangements and the private sector. Look at social services and delayed transfers of care in England. Look at local councils in England talking about a 15% council tax rise, potentially. And look at the only Conservative council in Wales that will be voting soon on borderline 4% council tax increase. As I said, this is a budget for the future of residents in the Vale. And if we're talking about pay increases, if we're talking about expenses, maybe do some sums on the amount of money that has been saved by the Cabinet in reducing down to 5 and claiming no expenses whatsoever in the past 5 years. I did calculations, it's over £500,000, maybe you'd like to as well.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Burnett, and the point is well made. But there have been people talking while other speakers have been up on their feet. Councillor Franks did. Councillor Franks, can you please sit down? What I would say to Councillor Franks, though, was that he did raise the issue of people talking while he was up on his feet speaking, but then he asked councillors a question. Now, you can't do that if you expect people to be quiet when you're speaking. I expect people to respect the person on their feet speaking and therefore not talk across the floor. So can we carry on, please, in a civilised manner? Thank you. Councillor Gwynne-John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interesting, you know, to hear the political debates tonight, the electioneering that's gone on in this chamber tonight. You know, expected, isn't it? I'll remind you of a council nearby us in Cardiff who 0% increase in council tax. This year, 3.7. Ever since that 0%, it's gone up and up and up, simply because it was absolutely crazy. 0%. It's impossible to run to. Oh, yeah, you can do it. You can run to it, Richard. Of course you, Councillor Burton. You can run to 0%. But when you come back next year, when you tell me that you're going to be in charge of this administration, I hope you manage to balance the budget, because you will take this council right to the bowels of the earth by spending all your reserves. It can't be done. And we know this, we've listened for this. I've been on this council now coming up to the end of 18 years. And I've listened to many people speaking at debates. And quite simply, 0% is a non-goer. As much as we all don't like paying council tax, it's a fact that we've got to face up to. And the fact is, the money's not coming down the line. We can argue all night about it. We can preach to the gallery and knock on doors and blame everybody else. But at the end of the day, it's a game, isn't it? It's a game that you play every year. It goes around the houses. But I'll tell you something now. Beware of next year. Because if you're in charge next year, Councillor Burton, maximum of 5%.
Thank you. Right. Can we all calm down, please? That was the last speaker. I'm going to ask Councillor Ian Johnson to just read out his motion again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendment on the page was that the general fund reserve would be increased from £700,000 to £2.486 million, and that under point 4 of that's point 2 of the recommendation. Under point 4, it would be that the council tax would be the same as it was last year. So that would be £1,111.23 for Band D, with other bands calculated accordingly.
Thank you. Before we move to the vote on that motion, and there will be a recorded vote, I did forget to give the opportunity to the leader to come back in and answer the couple of questions that were asked during that debate. So, leader. No, it's never too late.
So I do have the right to sum up, and the fact that Councillor Johnson has reiterated his resolution doesn't stop me saying what I want to say. Right. Let me take some of these things in order. In terms of the deflection, you said the deflection of the £700,000. Sorry, in terms of the budget. Yes, I'm using some of the budget, but that still leaves £8.5 million in the fund. If we did what you wanted to do, that would leave £6.786 million in the fund. That goes absolutely against the advice you're being given by your Section 151 officer. For years and years, you have been told that you need to have reasonable reserves, and a minimum level for this council reserve is £7 million. And I'll go further. If you also read some of the issues, because some people say it should be 5% of your budget, which would mean we should have reserves of £10.8 million. The reason that it's £7 million is because of the amount of reserves we have. So you're not only expecting us to go against our Section 151 officer, but you're also expecting us to use the reserves, which would put us in an even deeper hole than you would have been just by going under the £7 million. So you want to use the reserves in the fund. You want to use the reserves that we've been set aside. And why have we got those reserves? The reserves are set aside for very, very good reasons. You say some of the reserves are going up, and sometimes they are. And sometimes they're going up because they've been set aside. Because somebody said, oh, we can use the reserves. Well, actually, they were set there not because they're floating around. They're there for a specific purpose. I went through some of the issues in terms of the school investment strategy. And if you look at some of the issues in terms of where the funding would be and the reserves would be, if you look at some of those, it actually shows you that our reserves, which are currently, if it was by the end of 31st of March this year, there would be funds of £51 million. So if you look to 2020, it goes down to £25 million. It's halved. straight away. And after that, some of those reserves are there for Band B schools. So you couldn't have the Band B schools either. So those reserves are there for a purpose and they are being used. In terms of the Band B, yeah, we use Band B, we do indeed. Is it higher than inflation? Yes, it is, slightly. But one of the other things that I think you should know is that when we came here originally, and I am going to blame in some respects the UK government, because they have passported on for, reductions in local government spending, and they have passported it on to the Welsh Assembly government, and they have passported it on to us. Since we took control of this council, maybe I should say something else first. When you were in control, and you say about things like you didn't put council tax up, actually you did. You put council tax up during your term of about something like £111 on Band D. We are proposing, since our term, a proposal of £202. And I'm aware of that, but there's a reason. If you look at the term when the last administration was in office, the AEF, the funding from government, from Welsh Government, actually went up by nearly £7 million. So if it went up by £7 million, they don't necessarily have to put the council tax up too much. Since we've been here, the AEF, the council tax, the revenue support fund, has gone down by £16 million. So we've taken the hit, we've taken £16 million hit, yet we still provided the service that I think is second to none. We still have an authority which is the best performing in Wales, not for 1 year, but for 2 years, and not through us saying it, through independent examiners telling us that's the case. So £16 million worth of loss. So yes, we do have to pick some of those things up. So I am not ashamed to say we should have £2.8 million. What I am ashamed of is somebody telling us that we don't have to put £700,000 into the budget because you don't want it to. Now, somebody said this is you're doing it for political gain. I think you were doing it for political gain, because the easiest thing in the world for me to have done this year is to have a 0% council tax increase. But it would have been wrong. It would have been wrong. It would have been wrong because we still have to provide the services that we provide. So to actually take that amount of money to take us under £7 million and still talk about taking the reserves away is absolutely dire. In terms of the reshaping funding, John, you're right. Yeah, we have taken a long time about it. But that's because things are really hard. And we've looked at some of the things. It isn't as if we've kept it a secret. Everybody's had the reshaping services reports. They know exactly what's going on. There's no great panacea. Things take a long time to come about. And some of the reserves we put in place is to help that take place. We had reserves in terms of social services. And with that to use it, because there's been things like legislative changes, which we know had an effect. As an outcome on services, you said we said we'd have mobile libraries. We said we'd have mobile libraries in collaboration with town and community councils, and we tried that. And lo and behold, there was Barry Town Council was the only one that came forward. It was what I said, because I said we'd bring back the mobile libraries in conjunction. I wrote the manifesto, so I know what it says. It's true. And Barrytown were the only ones who came forward. So, yes, we did that, but we said we'd have to do it before. You said about outsourcing. I don't want to outsource. We've had a report recently about catering, and we've looked forward to having an arm's length company, and I think maybe that's the way forward. You talked about the leisure centres, yeah? That's a trust now. So not even that is in the real terms outsourcing. In terms of lack of funding and an equal basis from Welsh government, yeah, we can always argue that, but and you're right, you and I keep on telling you, and it is true that it was you were Secretary of State put the formula in place in the first place. And yes, I have argued with Welsh Government, and I'll continue to argue with Welsh Government to see whether we get better funding. In terms of, you're glad there's not 2 consecutive meetings. The reason that we had 2 consecutive meetings last year for recall was because we didn't have the final budget in time. So we had no alternative. In terms of Councillor Riley, it is difficult for people, I accept. I accept it's difficult for people, but it's difficult for everyone. We have savings, yes, and we're taking our time in getting those services, the savings. In terms of the reserves, you asked if they were adequate or excessive. They are not excessive. I just pointed out to you that at least half of them are going to go in the next couple of years. They are there for a specific purpose. It's not possible to use them for anything else because they are being allocated for that particular purpose. And that's based in our budget. You just agreed the capital budget. You just agreed everything that went forward. In terms of Councillor Franks, talking about the 25 million extra for the Assembly. I can't remember what that was about, Chris, but it doesn't matter. How effective were played? Well, how effective were played? £25 million across 22 other local authorities, and you've work the formula. Work the formula. You saw the 10 million quid, which was worked on a formula. And we're going to have £370,000, which was in the report. If you read that, so yeah. It is a robust budget. Yes, it is a robust budget. And you said there's no attempt to save. You said there's no attempt to save. Yes, there's an attempt to save because that's what the reshaping services is about. And I have got confidence in our officers, but it is going to take a long time. We learned through the libraries, and yeah, we did have to use communities, but that was the whole purpose of that as well, was working with communities. But it took longer than we actually thought. Things are really, really tight. So as far as I'm concerned, I have absolute confidence. Increasing the reserves, you keep on saying. I told you the reason for the increase in reserves. Some of the things are contained within the budget that you've seen. Some of the things are contained in the budgets that you just agreed in terms of the capital programme. The budget's out of control. It's not out of control. It's balanced. It's absolutely not. Councillor Johnson talked about the £4 million extra the variance last year, the favourable variance. If you read your report, you saw what that was about. You saw what that was about. Yes, we collected more council tax than we thought, and as a result, this year, what did we do this year? We put our base rate up, so that we expect to collect more. The reason that we didn't put it up last year, because I thought about doing it last year, was because we thought of the effect of austerity. In terms of austerity, John, I just don't understand where you're coming from, but so I'm not going to say any more about that. In terms of the reduction in post-16 education, yes, some schools will be affected, and we are addressing those issues. And I know the director is addressing those issues as day by day. They do affect sixth form provision, but one of the reasons they affect sixth form provision is because the number of sixth form pupils is going down. And the formula of the schools are having in each of the schools, because you keep on going about schools, and you should know because you're on finance committee of two, which I think are a bit of trouble. Yeah, but you're on the finance committee, you should be doing something about it. We are.
That's enough.
But we are. In terms of the slippage of roofs, we've told you the reasons for that. You didn't listen to that. Manipulated the budget for political purposes. If I was going to manipulate the budget, I'd have had 0%. The reason we've done it is because you have to do a budget which is reasonable, which has to go forward, because we know, and I told you, if you thought this was easy, we've already been told by the Secretary of State that the Cabinet Secretary, the next year is going to be worse than anything else. Bob, you talked about the savings. I've already said about the savings and reshaping services. Overspending in education and social services. Again, we've had myriads of reports in terms of that. You know very well, because you're the Vice Chair of the Lifelong Learning Committee, or whatever it's called now, Learning and Culture, that there's a problem with ALN. You've been told what it's about. You've been told what the recovery plan is about, and you've been told that it's inherited because of what has happened, because we expected to have more income from outside county. In terms of the reshaping services we've done, in terms of social services, again, you've been told what's happened with social services. We have an ageing population, we have a frailer population, and we need to spend and expend more money upon them. And that's why we've done what we've done in the budget. Again, you think it's good to take money from reserves. I think it's absurd. I think it's dangerous. In terms of Councillor Burton, you talked about people will remember the rise. Yes, they will probably remember the rise, but they also remember the things that we've provided for them. We've resurfaced lots of schools. We've done lots of. We've put in the pothole, the big fill. We have done play areas, and I'm very proud that we have, because it also meets our corporate plan issues in terms of healthier living. It's not a sting to the residents because it's still less than £1 a week. And again, you talked about using reserves. Well, you know, and if you think playgrounds are a bribe, then I don't know where you're coming from. In terms of Jeff James, in terms of the SSA disadvantage of the... welcome, Jeff. This is your last year, and I expected you to say something. I wouldn't have expected anything less from you, Jeffrey. SSA disadvantages, yeah, I accept. In some respects you can argue that, but we argue it, we can continue to argue it, and we'll continue to do that. But people could perceive in some respects that the Vales may be more wealthy than others. We'd never had things like the deprivation grant that others have had, and I try to argue that. And I will continue to do that as long as I'm here. In terms of Councillor Marnie, the spending of the head, same situation. I will still continue to do that and lobby and fight for it. In terms of a freeze on council tax in Wales, you say that the government, the UK government, has sent money in. Yeah, they did. They did send money in, and the UK and the Welsh Assembly government decided not to actually keep it, as you said, because you said twice they've kept the money. No, they haven't. They have passed it on, and they've passed it on with the help of that group over there too, because they have.
Can we
look? Chartering, you know, should he charter the plane? I don't know whether it's reasonable or not. Who paid for it? I don't know. But in terms of the money that came in terms of council tax freeze, as you put it, that was used for other purposes, which was agreed within the Assembly and with other parties within the Assembly too. I'm not going to talk about AM's planes, extra money to them, then that's up to them. We will continue to keep the fight going. Liz had made the point about we are building for the future, because that is exactly what we're doing. We have improved all the schools. Look at the schools that we've improved since we come here. What happened before? Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The asset renewal was minimal. Schools weren't kept up to a reasonable standard. As a result, what do you have to do? Build new ones, because they were so bad. They weren't fit for purpose. We started Cowbridge. We've done all the rest of them, all of them too. We've done the Welsh medium schools. We've put the new ones in there. We've got Lantwood Major coming on stream next week also. So yes, we have money in reserves, and I've put that through. And absolutely, Gwyn's absolutely right. There is electioneering going on here, but not by us. So as far as I'm concerned, put what on leaflets? I am proud of what we have done as an authority. We are the best performing authority in Wales. We have produced schools. We've regenerated lots and lots of areas. Some of you have been going on about the regeneration of Holton Road. Now it's done. You shut up about it, because we've done it. There's lots of things that we've regenerated within the county, including obviously Barry Island. Mr. Mayor, all I can say is I deplore the thought of using all of the reserves going against the advice of our Section 15 officer, I urge you to support this budget as I've proposed it.
Right. We're now going to have a...
Just for clarification, in 2013, this council set a budget which involved the reduction of reserves to £6.5 million. That's below the £7 million currently being
That's
discussed.
making a statement. So I'm going to move to the vote. I'm going to move to the vote on the amendment put forward by Plaid, and it was read out for the second time. We have been asked for a recorded vote. There will be a recorded vote on the amendment, and it'll be a straightforward in favour of the amendment or against. Managing Director.
Okay, in favour of the amendment or against the amendment, Councillor Aviat. Councillor Bennett. Councillor Burton. Councillor Janice Birch. Councillor Rhiannon Birch. Councillor Bird. Councillor Brooks. Councillor Burnett. Councillor Cox. Councillor Curtis. Councillor Drake. Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Edmonds. Councillor Egan.
Against.
Councillor Elmore. Councillor Franks. Councillor Hacker. Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Hartree. Councillor Hatton. Councillor Hodges. Councillor James. Councillor Hunter Jarvie. Councillor John. Councillor Fred Johnson. Councillor Ian Johnson. Councillor Kelly Owen. Councillor King. Councillor Marnie. Councillor Ann Moore. Councillor Neil Moore. Councillor Parker. Councillor Penrose. Councillor Powell. Councillor Probert. Councillor Riley. Councillor Roberts. Councillor John Thomas. Councillor Ray Thomas. Councillor William. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Clive Williams. Councillor Chris Williams. Councillor Eddie Williams.
Against.
Councillor Wilson. 21 for the amendment and 24 against. Yeah? 21, 24?
Okay. Right, the result of that vote then was 21 for the amendment and 24 against, so the amendment is lost. I'm now going to move to the motion put forward by the leader, seconded by the deputy leader. All those in favour, please show. Okay, and those against? Okay. Yeah. So that was 24 in favour of the motion and 21 against, so that is carried. Moving on to 10H then, which is the cat. No, no, no. 10H is the Cardiff and Vale of Glamorgan Population Needs Assessment. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a huge amount of work taking place around the needs assessments. And the purpose of it is to actually ensure that local authorities and local health boards jointly produce a clear and specific evidence base in relation to care support needs and carers' needs. And this will underpin the delivery of statutory functions and inform planning and operational decisions. This way, then, it will ensure services are planned and developed in an efficient and effective way by public sector partners, and this will promote the well-being of people with care and support needs. As I said, it was a very complex report, actually ran to well over 100 pages, and it included a lot of information around the methods that they used, as well as information on care and support needs, assets and prevention needs under each topic area. If you look on page 2, there's a number of overarching care and support needs there which emerged, and they're listed there. I'm not going to go through each individual one. I think everybody's got them there. And I think it's well worth noting as well that this plan is actually a 5-year plan. However, it's got to be revisited at least once during that 5-year term to actually review it and actually make sure it is still fit for purpose. So basically, this is actually going to be a live document then that will be worked on. I'm just asking for council approval because this has actually got to be approved by April 2017. I'm so looking for council to approve this tonight.
Is there a second? Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you to the Cabinet Member for introducing this item. The populations assessment is a very important document as it will lead to the plan for the next 5 years. That will be very important for whoever takes control of this council after May. As Vice Chair of the Healthy Living and Social Care Committee, can I just add weight to the importance of this? There are some specific elements to it that are highly important and are quite striking. I think the most obvious one for me being the suggestion that there is a gap of around 24 years in the healthy living age between people in the more affluent and least affluent parts of our council area. And as somebody who represents a community's first area, that is a very striking and shocking statistic. So the importance of that in public health is huge. Also, I think I was also struck by the mention that around 12% of the Vale of Glamorgan Council population have relationships with the armed forces. Perhaps it shouldn't be a surprise. After all, we had a debate here recently about the Count Me In campaign where a quarter of councillors gave some form of declaration about this, but that is the highest figure in Wales, and therefore I would like to put on record, as I did in the scrutiny meeting, the importance of having a proper policy and assessment of the needs of that set of population that's conducted within the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Council happy to approve? Yes. Thank you. That brings us on to item 11 then, which is to set the council tax, which we've already done, I believe. No.
As we have set the budget, so can I formally move the council tax resolution?
Thank you. That agreed? Yes. Thank you. Item 12 then is to inform the Council of the use of the urgency decision procedure under Article 14.14 of the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is excuse me. This is the urgency procedure, and it's basically to inform Council. But I know that in terms of the Coldbrook catchment flood risk management scheme, as Councillor Franks was interested in, it did go to Scrutiny Committee 2. In terms of 2B is the upgrade of the Cisco telephone telephony service. Again, that is for information as the use of emergency procedure has been used. Thank
you, Leader. They're just for noting anyway. Item 13 then is the questions. So we'll start off with question 1, community first clusters.
just did 12, right?
I thought... Pardon?
Oh, sorry, 12B. Which one?
No.
Oh, 10B. No, we're doing that at the end when the officers will leave. 12B.
12A and 12B I've put together.
I've dealt
because
with.
they're for noting.
I
And
dealt
the
with.
leader did cover both the topics. Okay?
It's the
well,
it's not.
No, it's all the people talking.
It is.
Okay, are we happy to move on? Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 13 then, which is questions. And the first question relates to Community First clusters.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillor Johnson. On 14th of February, the Cabinet Secretary announced the way forward for Communities First. It's intended to provide funding at 70% of current levels for the programme for 2017-18, which will allow the Barry cluster to continue in operation for a further year. A legacy fund has also been identified to allow the best of Communities First projects to seek funding going beyond March 2018.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much for that update. Obviously, I'm very sorry to hear about the cut in funding. How will the council be determining which of the schemes will be going forward, and how will local councillors be involved in that?
We're working very closely with stakeholders at the moment. The focus will be on prosperity, which is actually very much in line with the focus that we've taken within this council. I'm sure in the same way as we report on Communities First work currently, we would report on in exactly the same way on things going forward.
Okay. Question number 2 then, regarding business rates relief.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Can I begin by saying that the Council, just reiterating the point, has had no direct input in the revaluation exercise undertaken by the Valuation Office Agency. It does, however, have the duty to administer the statute and associated regulations in regard to the non-domestic rates. The Welsh Government has now announced its support for local businesses, which has been adversely impacted upon by the recent re-evaluation exercise, which takes place from takes effect, from the 1st of April 2017. The Minister has announced a non-domestic small business rate relief scheme, a transitional rate relief scheme, and more recently a high street rate relief scheme. The small business rate relief scheme and the transitional rate relief scheme are targeted at small businesses with rateable values below £12,000, whilst the high street rate relief scheme is targeted at businesses with within urban areas the businesses within urban areas wholly or mainly used for the sale of goods, food and drink, or the provision of retail services with rateable values below £50,000. From preliminary estimates of the 2017-18 non-domestic accounts, the value of the relief distribution to the small business rate relief is £3,634,783 to be exact, which impacts on about 1,868 Vale ratepayers, and the amount of attributable to the transitional rate relief scheme is £763,614, which impacts on 599 Vale ratepayers. Further detailed guidance and specific criteria is awaited from the Welsh Government on the high street rate relief scheme proposal, and in order to calculate the amount of relief afforded to the business in the Vale, and I can confirm that applicable rate relief will be afforded to those businesses in Holton Road and High Street and other appropriate retail areas that meet the necessary criteria. Once again, I would stress the fact is that we had no input into the re-evaluation exercise. We just have to collect the money.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. I appreciate your concerns and explaining that again. Could you just clarify whether businesses will be, whether that relief will be provided automatically to businesses, or will they need to apply for it? Do we know that information yet, particularly with regards to the new ones?
No, I don't know that information yet, but I will certainly find out for you. It seems to me that if we've already targeted some of the rateable values, so we know them anyway, so that we will be as cooperative as we possibly can. But I will confirm whether or not they have to apply or whether or not it's automatic, and I actually don't know.
Question number 3 then, refugee resettlement in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. The Vale of Glamorgan Council has been working in partnership with Cardiff Council to participate in the Syrian Resettlement Programme, commonly known as the SRP. Through careful planning and collaboration with key stakeholders, I'm delighted to report the authorities successfully resettled 9 adults, by adults I mean 18 plus, and 9 children in the Vale of Glamorgan since June 2016. The most recent arrivals on the 28th of February 2017 meant that we have fulfilled the commitment we made at the beginning of the programme to provide refuge to 4 families with accommodation and support. The recent announcement regarding the Dubs Amendment has created much uncertainty about the UK Government policy for assisting vulnerable unaccompanied children. The scheme played a crucial role during the closure of the Calais refugee camps in October and the subsequent reception of children into the UK. While the Vale of Glamorgan Council offered its full support to the multi-agency task force coordinated by Cardiff Council, care placements were not ultimately required on that occasion.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you for that response. I'm pleased to hear that we've met the 4 families target, which was our initial aim. Obviously, the removal of, or the government's lack of support on the Dubs amendment and the Dubs scheme is very concerning. I'm aware that Carwyn Jones has written about this. Can you please make this, your concerns clear to Cabinet members, Cabinet secretaries in the Assembly to make sure that they are now fully aware and they push for support on the UK government on this?
This has actually been discussed. There was, cause I sit on the resettlement programme board with Cardiff, and that was actually discussed, and a letter actually has been formulated. And also the WLGA have also written to the Home Office as well.
Question number 4 then, in relation to Upper Cosmoston Farm housing.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Answer the question. The new allocations were required because the Planning Inspector's Action Point 5 from the hearing session 2 and 3, which relates to housing provision, held on the 19th and 20th of January. I don't think you were there at the time, but I don't think Councillor Marnie, you were there, but the action point required that the Council reconsider the proposed windfall allocations and should consider the implications of incorporating a more realistic windfall allowance on the housing land supply. The Council's response to this action point is available on the examination website under matters arising documents for the hearing sessions 2 and 3. The Council response disputed the Inspector's assertions that the windfall allowance was too high, but ultimately the Inspector maintained his concerns. This resulted in a reduction in the windfall allowance element of the housing supply and the housing shortfall of 653 dwellings. As a direct result of this intervention, amendments were made to the housing allocation plan. It was the Inspector's refusal to accept the originally proposed windfall allocation and the robust justification behind this that left a shortfall of housing allocation of the 653 houses. And the Inspector clearly required the Council to address that shortfall. In doing so, the Council was required by the Inspector to identify readily available and deliverable sites and to explain how any new allocations would address the plan's aims. I'll confirm that again, is that in doing so, the Council was required by the Inspector to identify readily available and deliverable sites and to explain how any new allocations would address the plan's aims, objectives and overall spatial strategy, as well as the underlying evidence base. As a result of the Inspector, that's the reason we took those actions.
Councillor Manning.
Don't know if I'm living in a parallel universe here. You've just made up your own question and answered your own question. My question was, did the Vale Planning Department, LDP team, administration put forward the figure for 576 houses at Upper Cosmoston Farm? or did the planning inspector? You've waffled on about something about houses. I've asked a specific question on a specific site, and I would like a specific answer. Did the planning inspector put forward 576 houses, or did the Vale administration? Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I'll give you the answer that I'm intent to give you. It's indisputable that the inspector's direct intervention has resulted in these changes to the allocations. Or to put it another way, if it wasn't for the inspector's interventions, would such a change have been made? The answer is no. So, giving you another question.
Okay, you've had the answer. You've had the answer to your supplementary. Please sit down, Mr. Councillor Mahoney. Councillor Mahoney, you've had the answer. Please sit down.
Qualification. Well, surely.
No, you've had the answer. That's it.
Well, I haven't had an answer, have I?
Well, that's
You haven't even touched my question.
You're entitled to ask a supplementary question. The response that you've been given is the answer. That is it.
But
if you're
it
not
hasn't
happy with that
answered my
response,
question.
I suggest you write in.
Transparency.
Please sit down.
Well, I did write
The
in. That's what
question
this
has
is.
been answered.
That's what this is.
No, please sit
Quite
down.
clear.
Will you please sit down?
Why don't you ask, if you're running the meeting,
Right.
ask people to answer the question they were asked?
I'm on my feet now. Will you please sit down? Otherwise, I'm going to ask for you to be removed from the council chamber.
Surely it's incumbent on you to
No.
insist that the answer
Please.
to the question is
We're
asked.
going to move on to the next question.
You can't run a meeting.
Question 5,
chain
Upper
up.
Cosmoston Farm site.
Different version of the truth. Let's wait for the microphone.
Somebody's got their mic on. Can I turn it off, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd refer you to the answer in response to your earlier question. The allocations are as a direct result of the inspector's intervention in relation to windfall assumptions. In terms of the role being undertaken by the inspector, he is examining the soundness of the LDP, and in doing so, will be examining the soundness of assertions, policies and allocations. This is why he's examined the housing supply figure and how it is proposed that this housing supply figure be met. He's raised concerns that the windfall contribution is too high and that the shortfall be made up by additional provision through allocations. These new allocations are required as a direct consequence of his intervention. This is indisputable. If you have any concerns with the way the inspector is examining the LDP, then you need to take up those concerns with the Welsh Government and the Planning Inspectorate.
Well, I did with the planning inspector, and he refuted what you just said, basically, in public at the LDP hearing. My
What's the
specific,
question?
again, you've totally ignored the question. I have asked specifically about one site, Upper Cosmoston Farm. And you've totally done the same as Neil Moore, totally ignored the question.
That's not a supplementary question that you've asked,
Well,
Councillor Mahoney.
Here's my
If there is
supplementary
if
question.
there's a question,
Who put forward the 576, the Vale or the planning inspector? He's denying it.
you've had
Are
the
you
answer
quest-
to that. Please sit down. We're moving on. Question 6 is regarding the vote letter mishap. A leader's going to respond to this.
Thank you. Answer 51,104 household notification letters dated the 30th of January 2017 contained an error in respect of an open register preference. All the electoral registration data in respect of whether a household member was registered and voting method was accurate. At no time was the electoral register affected by the error, and there was no data protection breach. So it was sent out because there was an error in terms of the open register preference. In other words, if were you on an open register, yes or no, the default was wrong.
Supplementary, Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wonder what the cost was of rectifying this mistake, and what will be done to ensure that a similar thing will not happen again in future. Thank you very much.
This was obviously carried out through human error. We can all make mistakes, but there was a cost, obviously. The cost of printing and replacement of the letters was £4,289, and the postage costs were £1,489. £1,489. I can't even say it. £14,891. As far as the investigation is concerned, because they were sent out to, as I said, 51,000 properties, an investigation is ongoing regarding the error, and a debrief for staff will follow and highlight how the error was occurred, and obviously clearly if there was a mistake, whether it was a human error or otherwise, whether it was a system error, then it's worth it will be addressed. But it is worth emphasising that at no time was the electoral register affected as a result of the error. It went to each individual. All other electoral registration data contained in the January letter in respect to whether a household member was registered and voting method was accurate, there was no data breach.
Question number 7 then is English language education in Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Johnson. You'll be aware that a statutory notice was published in January to establish 2 mixed-sex English medium schools for pupils aged 11 to 18 to replace Barry and Bryn Havern comprehensive schools. It's proposed that the new schools operate a joint sixth form under a single head of sixth form. Cabinet will consider an objection report on the proposal and will make a decision on the 6th of March.
Supplementary.
Thank you for that answer. We have heard earlier about cuts in funding for education. I hope as part of the discussion on Monday, will you consider the implications on the robust nature of a sixth form that will operate across both sites, so that's not that 16 to 19 education is not ignored.
It's been a long journey to get to this point. That journey was informed by an advisory panel which was established to develop the proposal, and also considered a number of other options for post-16 education, including a standalone tertiary college, a shared provision with Cardiff and Vale College, and the option of a sixth form being provided by one of the schools. The advisory panel concluded that the proposed model of a joint sixth form will enable sustainable post-16 provision to be developed, but we work very closely with our schools across the Vale, and we will continue to discuss all pressures on them as we go forward.
Okay. Question number 8, update on the implementation of the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Wales Act 2015.
That's it. There we are. There we are. Try that.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I'll try this one. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. A new domestic and sexual abuse coordinator commenced employment with the Vale of Glamorgan in January 2017. Part of their role is to ensure that the Vale of Glamorgan implement the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Wales Act 2015. The focus of which is on prevention, protection and support. To date, excellent progress has been made, including 57 properties receiving target hardening in 2016-17, which has enabled vulnerable tenants to remain in their homes without the need to relocate into alternative accommodation. Feedback from victims is that it's not only has let them remain within their own homes, but their feeling of safety and protection has increased, which I'm sure you agree is extremely important. In January 2017, a perpetrator was sentenced to 20 weeks in prison for a breach of a restraining order that was caught on CCTV as part of the target hardening service. Supporting People services will be tendered for domestic and sexual abuse services in 2016-17 as well. And Community Safety and Supporting People ensured that the specifications for services were relevant to the need in the Vale, and that robust monitoring is in place to ensure victims are receiving the support that is required. The Council has implemented the National Training Framework within the Vale of Glamorgan Council, and that training is to ensure that all staff receive the relevant training that's proportionate to their role. And this provides employees with the opportunity to identify potential victims and perpetrators and where they can signpost them for the relevant support. Work has now progressed to review the joint opportunities that exist between the substance misuse and domestic abuse services. A development day has been organised to take place on 25th of April 2017, which will actually bring together all these people. There are obvious links between the two priority areas. However, better information shared across the two service areas is required to ensure that the victims receive the correct support at the most appropriate time.
Supplementary.
Thank you for that, that detailed response. Is it required of the Council to pass a scheme related to violence against women as part of the Act? And if so, when is that intended to be brought forward?
Right, so did you say pass a scheme? That I'd have to get you a written answer for. I'm not 100% sure. I'd rather give you a written answer to that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Question number 9 then is CCTV.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I'm on the wrong question. Beg your pardon. I was thinking that doesn't make sense. The Council took a decision in 2014 to enter into a partnership arrangement with Bridgend County Borough Council for the monitoring of CCTV cameras in the Vale. The live monitoring system transferred to Bridgend in March 2016, and it was agreed that the two local authorities would also tender a joint maintenance contract to allow consistency in repairs and service and to gain greater efficiency savings due to the increase in the number of cameras to be maintained. This has unfortunately taken some time to arrange, and the maintenance contract for the Vale expired in 2015, and whilst cameras were being maintained on a reactive basis in the interim period prior to the joint maintenance contract commencing, there was no formal maintenance contract in place, and this led to a number of cameras suffering a range of faults and a number not being fully operational. As you've indicated, this position has since been rectified. A new and improved joint maintenance contract has now been agreed in principle between ourselves and Bridgend. In this new contract, shorter response times by the contractor to attend to faults on priority cameras has been included. This means that in future, if any of our priority cameras develop a fault, then the contractor must respond within 4 hours, if we deem this to be necessary. For all other faults, it would be 24 hours. All cameras will be also checked twice a year to enable cleaning and to allow general maintenance to take place. In addition, members will hopefully take comfort from the fact there are now improved arrangements in place for monitoring all contracts with regular updates to corporate management team on issues relating to contract provision and monitoring.
Supplementary? No, fine. Lovely. Question 10 then, electrical vehicle charging in the Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor William, for the question. This is not a matter of council direct responsibility, in the same way that we don't sell petrol or diesel. It is not a top priority for the council at present, but we will keep the matter under review, which will include the provision of what is being made available commercially.
Okay, supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor King. Therefore, if I passed on details to you of a £2.5 million fund available from the Office for Low Emission Vehicles, they are inviting bids from any local authority. They will cover 75% of the capital charge of installing them. If I pass those details on, would you be so kind as to consider making bid for such funding?
Okay.
Thank you. I am actually aware of the scheme, but it is only for 75%. And the other problem we've got really at the moment is that there seems to be a very low take-up of electric vehicles that would call for it. I think what the officers are keeping it under monitoring, because if there's a sign of a demand, then we'll pursue it. But at the moment, there just doesn't seem to be the demand for it.
Okay.
Well,
excuse me. Question number 11 is transport network issues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Franks. This is going to sound like an awful lot of jargon, so I'll try and do my best. The study is a well-tagged Stage 1 appraisal, which includes 6 separate tasks that go like this. Task 1 is the baseline review, which involves the review of all previous work and studies undertaken on improvements in transport linkages in this area. The second task is data analysis, which involves an appraisal of all relevant data sources to understand understand and evidence the current situation, such as the existing travel patterns and movements, together with an appraisal of the existing multimodal transport provision on the Dennis-Paris transport network. Third task identifies problems, objectives and options, and will summarise the problems based on the gathered evidence and set objectives for the area based on national and locally specified objectives. The report will identify a long list of options which could address the problem. The options identified will aim to address the road-based congestion at key junctions of this corridor and will consider a range of different modes. The fourth task is our stakeholder workshops, of which there will be 2 undertaken this month. The first event will be a structured workshop involving key stakeholders such as the community councils and the transport operators, and invites for this event have in fact been sent out. The second event will be a drop-in event for the public on Monday the 13th of March in the Dennis-Paris Parish Hall from 1:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. The fifth task is the option appraisal, which the various options will be put into a list of possible detailed appraisal based on their ability to solve the problem, their ability to meet the objectives set, their short and longer term impacts, their deliverability, their robustness to uncertainty. The sixth task is to produce a report of the strategic outline case, and it's currently anticipated the draft report will be presented to Cabinet in June 2017. In addition, a transport grant bid has been submitted to the Welsh Government to take any options identified by this first report forward to the next stage, and it's hoped that we will know whether this bid has been successful later this month, maybe early next.
Okay. Oh. Well, thank you for reading out Claire Cameron's email to everyone. I'm sure everyone absorbed that information.
Question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given that the total budget for this hugely complicated matter is £15,000, can you give some comfort when people question about the robustness of this investigation and how effective it's going to be to tackle the problems within Dennis-Paris area? Thank you.
Well, I thought I'd done that by reading out all the 6 phases of the report.
Yeah.
£15,000 is for this investigation. It's not for the work that may follow.
Question number 12 is signage for the runoff St Barrack's Chapel. Ruin of, sorry. It is getting late.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor William. There are currently issues regarding an information sign that has been erected within the confines of the ruins of St Barrack Chapel, Barry Island. We were asked to look at installing an interpretation sign at the site some time ago. This was delayed due to budgets, but was progressed as part of the Barry Island interpretation project. Our plan was to install an information sign outside the gates. The copywriting and translation was completed a few months ago. However, in the meantime, a blank sign appeared within the confines of the site without the knowledge of the council and on the same location as an old sign. Initially, we were unable to find out who'd arranged the installation of the sign. I understand that during a discussion with officers, you mentioned that you'd look into it and then reported back about 3 months later in early January, at which time you asked for a progress update. Notwithstanding this delay, the tourism team were able to trace the newly installed sign back to All Saints Church, Romilly. A member of their congregation had donated funding to have the sign reinstalled. Reverend Kevin Lake confirmed that they had commissioned the installation but had not progressed content to date. To our understanding, this was not discussed at a wider committee by the diocese, and that the commission of the work was done at a local level. The remains of St Barrack's is a scheduled monument. The code is GM126 brackets GLA. And as such, any works to demolish, damage, remove, repair, add or alter requires authorisation from the Welsh ministers, in effectively Cadw. Unfortunately, no permission was sought by the church to erect the sign from either Cadw or the council. The council's senior planner for conservation and design has visited the site with a representative from Cadw, and they have concluded that the sign should be removed. Given the sensitivity of the site, the removal of the sign may need to be supervised by an appropriately qualified archaeologist. It was further concluded that an interpretation sign would be better placed outside the gates of the site, and that confirmation will be provided in terms of the permissions required for its installation. Once the issues above have been settled and confirmation of approval to install the sign external to the site, the tourism team will liaise with the Parks Department to progress those already prepared.
Supplementary?
This has been going on for years. Money was found for it in the budget, and still, I mean, this is pathetic.
Question?
Failure to deliver.
Question?
Well, okay. My question is quite simple. It's irrelevant what's going on inside there. I mean, if that sign has been determined that it shouldn't be there, well, that sign's been there long enough. Should have been taken away ages ago. My question is, why can't you give me a timetable as to when we have got the money? Why can't we just put our own sign up on our own land with the text that has already been done? Why can I not be given a date for that? We've been waiting over 3 years for this.
I think it might be a bit easier once you get a written answer to see that I've actually answered virtually everything you said. We are talking about an important scheduled monument. There are an awful lot of permissions that are required for work on that. As I've already pointed out, the interpretation and notice board has been prepared and has been translated. Once we have gone through the legal processes for a scheduled monument, the budget is in place, it will be installed, and I'm sure that the officers will keep you informed.
Question 13, junctions that require highway improvements.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Franks. The findings of a highway impact assessment have been used by the Council to inform the LDP and will continue to be useful in planning strategic improvements on the highway network in the Vale of Glamorgan. I acknowledge it highlights areas where there are or are likely to be capacity problems on the highway network, and the Council will endeavour to maximise opportunities to manage these impacts and plan improvements where possible. In particular, the Council will review requirements for the improvement of individual junctions on a case-by-case basis as and when development identified within the LDP are submitted to the Council for planning approval. I am delighted to advise the member that a number of transport rated schemes have already come forward and have been or are in the process of being implemented as a result of the Council's LDP. These include the new Barry Island Link Road, improvements to the A4226 between Waycott Cross, Barry and Sycamore Cross, A48, 5 Mile Lane, improvements to the B4265 at Charleston, Old Mill, Cross Common Road Junction, improvements north of A48 Bombleston Road improvements, and a link road between the A48 and Lanswick Major Cowbridge.
Thank you. I didn't realise 5 Mile Lane was a junction, I must say. Does not the failure of the Cabinet member to address the specific junctions that I'm referring to that have been extracted from the LDP show how residents have been seriously misled by the expectations raised in the LDP when these junctions were specifically mentioned requiring improvement? And I don't suppose people will be surprised not one of these have been improved.
Apart from the ones I just mentioned that have been improved, and the two at either end of 5 Mile Lane, the LDP hasn't been approved yet either.
Question 14, Metro scheme update.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Franks. The next stage of work on this important transport corridor is to carry out transport modelling of the Mary-Harrier Junction to ensure that proposals being considered as part of the recent Capita report will not have a detrimental impact on the traffic flow and congestion. Funding has been identified to carry out the modelling, and officers will soon be commissioning the work. The outcome of this work will inform future metro proposals in this location.
Okay, thank you. I'm grateful for that information. Basically, you're saying very little has been done. How can the public have any confidence that this scheme will significantly improve the public transport network in the Dinas Powys, Penarth and Cardiff bus corridor?
I don't think any research or modelling will persuade the public anything. The proof will be in what is eventually delivered.
Question number 15 then is the Penarth Pier Pavilion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillor Franks. As Councillor Franks will be aware, the operation and management of the Pier Pavilion is subject to a long lease agreement between the Council and Penarth Arts and Crafts Limited, or PACL, an independent charity and company limited by guarantee. As with other similar lease arrangements, council officers are in contact with representatives of PACL as tenants. However, I'm unable to publicly disclose the details of any discussions due to issues of commercial confidentiality associated with the lease. I am able to confirm that discussions have taken place with the management of PACL to consider the long-term financial viability of the organisation. To this end, I'm also able to confirm that the Council will be meeting with representatives from PACL, Heritage Lottery Fund and the Big Lottery in the near future to continue these discussions.
Thank you. I think members of the public will be disconcerted to be excluded from important matters relating to the pavilion.
Councillor
And my
Franks.
question is, thank you for prompting me, how will you ensure that the pavilion continues to play an important role in the life of Penarth and the Vale generally?
Resilience of an organisation is not just about money. This council's been working with PACL and also working to renovate the pier and the pavilion over a long period. I know that Maureen, Councillor Kelly-Owen and I were both on the board back in about 2005 when the pier pavilion project was first mooted. There's also been support from this council in terms of project management in the construction phases of the renovation of the pier pavilion. We will continue to work with Penarth Arts and Crafts. We will also continue to be committed to the future of the pier pavilion, but it also needs to be noted that there are two previous charges on the property, Big Lottery and Heritage Lottery Fund, so any discussions with the future resilience of the property would have to involve those two organisations, as it is doing.
Okay. Right, that brings us on to agenda item 14, questions from the public. There has been one question from public submitted. The member of the public is not here this evening, so as normal the reply will be read out. Leader?
Yes, thank you. I am disappointed that Mr Pendlebury Brown was not aware of this scheme. As a comprehensive public consultation has taken place regarding the scheme, which has been implemented following a request from the local community for improved play facilities in the area. I can confirm that leaflets were distributed to all houses in the area of Park Crescent to Salisbury Road, which is where he lives, Cumbarry Way, parts of Pontypridd Road and Jenner Road, Peterswell Road and streets off Cumkiddy Estate. In July 2015, following an initial meeting with the councillors, interested residents and council officers, a further leaflet was then distributed in the same houses in September 2015, inviting residents to attend a public meeting in Romilly School, which was held on the 30th of September 2015. Following this meeting, a local play association was formed, which undertook the following community events, which were also used to consult on the proposed new playground. These included an egg hunt, summer play sessions, consultation events in local schools, press releases, and were published in the local press and an active social media network. Further meetings were then held with representatives of the new Play Association and councillors and council officers in April and June 2016. In September 2016, a further leaflet was distributed detailing that funds had been secured for the play area at Salisbury Road and that improvements would also be made to the Peterswell Road play area. Throughout the process, it was made clear from consultation that the existing site of the play area was not in the best location in terms of safety of children, and that the decision and the existing site had significant challenges in terms of constructing a new facility. The decision to move the site to a more visible location, which offered greater scope for an enclosed play area, excluding dogs, was made earlier in the process, and this was firmly supported by the new Play Association. Discussions also took place with the Council's Planning Department regarding the proposed new location, and confirmation was received that no planning permission was required. I can also say that I've been in email correspondence with Neil Pendlebury Brown, and I also know that the local members have been involved in discussion in an email correspondence with him. And indeed, today, I have contacted him again today, because I knew he wasn't coming, to offer a further meeting if he wanted it. But I have to be assured that all of the consultation took place, and I know that Councillor Drysdale has also emailed him with all this detail too. So I just answer the question to the member of the public.
Leader. Right, that brings us back now to the item that we put to the end of the agenda, which is 10B. A number of officers are now going to have to leave. We'll let them leave before we carry on.
Talk about you now. So you're going to use to talk some down, huh?
Okay, Leader.
Thank you. We do have two members of staff here, obviously, to take the minutes. Hopefully this will be fairly quick. Cabinet Council is asked to consider and endorse the Council's pay policy for 17-18, which was attached as Appendix A to the report, which went to Cabinet on the 6th of February. Because the Council does have a statutory requirement under the Localism Act 2011 to prepare a pay policy statement for the new financial year for 17-18. The statement needed to be approved and published by the 31st of March 2017. The pay policy statement for 2017-18 has again been produced on the basis of a statutory guidance, advice from the Welsh Government, Association and guidance from Welsh Government. There is one issue in terms of this, and I should have taken advice, but I didn't. In terms of the report itself, it sets out in the veiled policy. It talks about introduction and purpose, the scope of the legislation, the definitions, the key principles, the pay details, which talks about the Green Book and single status. It also talks about pay structure for chief officers. And in relation to chief officers, there's a, and I can ask you to bear with me on this one. There was a chart showing the level of our officers. For example, the level managing director is at salary range 1. In the report, it says that we have one director at director level 1, and the rest were at director level 2. Head of services laid there. Operational managers are there, and operational managers 1 and 2 are there. So basically, in the chart, we had a managing director 1, director level 1, which was Phil Evans. We had directors 2, were 2 of them, which is the other part of the management team, and then heads of service, operational manager 1 and 2. I'm not sure whether or not we need to actually address this tonight, in that technically the pay policy, because the new director has been appointed from the 1st of March. and this has to go in by the 31st of March. So I suggest that I take delegated advice, if that's okay with you, is that I think we probably send this in showing that Managing Director 1, Director Level 2, 3. So it makes sense? Okay. So we have to prepare this pay policy. As I said, it talks about salary ranges. It talks about election payments. We need to address that because obviously we have election officers. And it talks about pay ranges for staff other than Green Book. It talks about recruitment of chief officers. Talks about pension and redundancy service and severance payments. And it's going to be published. And it also talks about pay relativities within the authority, which talks about the lowest pay against that highest pay. It talks about accountability and decision-making, re-employment, and reviewing the policy. It is a standard policy we have. The only difference now would be that the number of directors have changed levels. Can I formally move that we accept it and that we publish it as required? It did actually go to scrutiny performance and co-op performance and resources at that time, and there was no comments, as I hope there wouldn't be tonight. So can I formally move with that amendment?
Okay, all agreed? Thank you. You'll be pleased to know I've got no other items under part 1 or part 2. Safe journey home.